motion to invoke Rule 19.
I'll recognize Councilmember Fender.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. If Councilor Smith can please conduct a roll call vote to invoke motion 19, Rule 19, please.
Councilmember Scroggins Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Robati.
Aye.
Councilmember Rao.
Aye.
Councilmember Garamella.
Aye.
Councilmember Fender.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson.
Aye.
Mayor Cawley.
Aye.
The motion to invoke Rule 19 passes unanimously.
Thank you, sir. So now we're at discussion items, and just to set the expectations, we are looking to spend 1 hour on each of these items. Our first item is a joint meeting with the Morrisville Public Education Advisory Committee, and the way we're going to try to do this, we're going to pass it to Mark Dixon, who is the chair, and then we're going to encourage everyone to use the chat function in Teams if they have a question or a comment, and we'll manage comments in that way. So at this time, I'd like to pass the virtual microphone to Chair Mark Dixon.
Hey, good evening, everybody. Thank you, Town Council, for having us. And I think the first thing we should do is introduce the members of the Morrisville Public Education Advisory Committee. There are 2 new members since we met last, so I will let Angie and Tracy go first, and then we'll follow along.
Resident of Morrisville for about 20 years. We're at this point. Are you able to hear me before I move forward? Hopefully you're able to hear me. And okay, and I'm actually been a resident of 20 years at Morrisville, and also a faculty member at North Carolina State University within the College of Education. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Next up, that was Angie, right?
Yes, this is Angie. Thank you.
We got Tracy on. Okay, well, the rest of the committee can follow through. So I see Steph's on. Go ahead, Steph. Okay.
I can go next.
Go ahead. Yeah. Everyone just chime in when the last person is done.
Okay. Good evening, all. My name is Lisa Stevenson, and I have been a resident of Morrisville for a little over 2.5 years. I'm a stay-at-home mom, and have 2 children who are in, 1 child right now in Wake County Public Schools.
I'll go. This is Elizabeth O'Connor. I go by Betsy O'Connor. I've lived in Morrisville about 6 years now, and I'm a faculty member at University of Phoenix.
I can go next. This is Sarah Fuller. I'm a retired software engineer from IBM and also retired high school math teacher from Lee County. I've lived in Morrisville for 19 years.
I can go next. Hello, I'm Vinita Cardoza, and I've been a resident of Morrisville for about 14 years now. I work as a senior scientist at BASF Corporation.
I'll go next. This is Renee Providence. I've been a resident of Morrisville since 2011. I am a federal contractor and an entrepreneur. And I also have have a son that goes to Panther Creek.
I'll go next. I'm Vidya Das Akifati. I've been living in Morrisville for over 16 years. I'm a stay-at-home mom. I have two daughters, elementary school child and a high schooler.
I'll try. Hi, this is Stephanie Reed. Sorry, I had hard drive problems on my Kindle Fire right now, which I have a hard time operating. But I'm a Morrisville resident. I've lived here since 2006, and I have a daughter in high school who's in 11th grade. She's a magnet at Enloe. And that's pretty much it.
Okay, I think that's everything. I'll finish up. Mark Dixon, a 10-year resident of Morrisville with two kids in middle school. So let's get into the agenda, shall we? Let's see. I just wanted to I think you all got the documentation that we sent previous, but I would like to just display it up on the screen. Do I take control, or is somebody going to do that for us?
Is he ready for the presentation?
You can request control. You should be able to see that button on your screen, sir. Or we can scroll through for you, if that's easier.
Yeah, that'll probably be easier. Just yeah.
All right, coming up now.
PAC PowerPoint, the one that's I see at the bottom of the screen.
Okay, you should see it now.
That's the one. Yep. Okay. So I'm not going to go through this a lot, but just give you a snapshot of where we've been and how we got to today. So next slide. So we got our charter last year, and thanks the town council for engaging the community with regard to advocacy for public education. So from our charter, we've been developing a work plan that took us quite a few months to get through, and I'll credit Erin Hudson for helping us through to get to that plan. She's been a huge help to get us organized. And from the work plan, we've recently started gathering information about some projects that we may want to take on. So this is going to sort of go in a cycle where we'll consider projects to advise the town council on that may reflect a change to the work plan in the future, and then it cycles through from there. So next slide. So that's just a roadmap. Again, you've all seen that. You'll see that cycle there. But the next slide will just show, I think, a table of some of the things that we were working on. Let's see. So from our work plan, we've identified really three key areas: advocacy, community engagement, awareness, and school engagement and involvement. So we won't go through this slide, but the work plan reflects these topics. Next slide. And then here's some of our interests. I asked for each of our council members or our committee members to ask what kinds of things they would like to do in our committee. And so far, this is the feedback that aligns with the work plan. Next slide. So we can get out of this document and go back to the joint committee meeting agenda.
Oh, went too far.
So some of our goals have been, there it is. So some of our goals for 2020-21 so far have been to try and establish relationships with Lake County Public Schools. Obviously, they're a key player in why we have gathered. And that includes having our council, some of our committee members attend the board meetings, the board advisory council meetings, and Betsy O'Connor's been doing that with Stephanie. Go ahead. So that's an ongoing process where we engage with Lake County Public Schools to get a pulse on what they're talking about and how they're proceeding, especially now that we're all virtual now. There's going to be some topics of discussion that will come up that'll go through the board and to our committee. And then, again, the other goal primarily is to just gather information for our project. So you saw those. And I think the goal for tonight really is to open up the discussion to the town council. We want to hear from you about where we've been. Do our projects align with what you think you want to have us do? And I just want to really just start that discussion with the work plan.
Okay, Mark, thank you very much for that brief intro. We really appreciate it, and thank you very much for providing all of these documents in advance. We all got a chance to look over them, so we're in a place where we can sort of make comments and dig right in. So first I'll recognize Councilmember Scroggins-Johnson and then Councilmember Rapagi. Ms. Scroggins-Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. First off, I would really like to say thank you to each and every one of our educational committee members, because I know that most of you have been doing this for almost a year. We had a little bit of a break during the March timeframe when every meeting and every committee meeting kind of stopped because of the pause that we all had to take, but it is time now to restart, and the work plan is a good way to kind of focus your energies. And I do appreciate having that work plan to look at and review and to consider, because I wanted to give you a little bit of a background. We only have an hour, so I'm going to try to be as concise as I can be. We really put a lot of effort on the part of the town council to make sure that this committee was geographically balanced, that we had people from different backgrounds, different perspectives, because we value education so highly in Morrisville, and we want the best opportunities for all of our families when it comes to education. And that's just not kindergarten through 12th. That is also community college and college itself. So we want to look at that from a broad perspective. With that said, I have been watching some of the meetings, and I feel like I've let you down. I feel guilty that when I look at the charter, we have given you so many things in the charter that we want you to focus on, that I saw you spinning and trying to find the best way forward. And I take part of blame for that, because a charter should help you focus and be very clear about what we want from our Citizen Advisory Committee. So keep that in mind as I share some of this. With the work plan, I think it's very important that the committee be advocates for the citizens and the council, and to advise our council as to what's going on in the educational workspace. I looked for, things like benchmarking and workforce needs and general advocacy from the group. But what I did not believe was part of this is I did not see in the charter where the committee would appoint a person to advocate on behalf of the town to the Wake County Public School System. And I wasn't quite sure, but I looked at all of our advisory committees, and we do not have spokespeople or individuals speaking on behalf of the town to other kind of related entities. So the advocacy is very much a goal of our committee, but the advocacy is for other Morrisville residents to kind of help us all work together, and also to help advise the town council. So I'm not really comfortable with appointing a single person to work with and advocate for the Wake County Public School System. I'd be very happy to hear reports and updates and so forth to the council or public comments, but not really comfortable with the advocate appointed. So just sharing that for right now. I'd like to hear more from each of you, and also my peers, my town council members. So thank you.
Thank you. I'd now like to recognize Councilmember Rabati.
Thank you, Mayor. So I would like to know if you all have, I understand that you have a work plan and a charter, and I certainly don't want to mess with that, but I was wondering if you had given any thought to surveys or focus groups or anything in terms of how we can support parents that are trying to help their kids do school online right now. I know that in literally every Facebook group of parents that I'm in, a lot of people are struggling with that, and I was just wondering if you would, I'd just like to hear your thoughts on whether your charter would stretch to include that kind of thing. Oh, and also congratulations to the 2 new members. Very happy to have you on board. So, and Mark, did I hear correctly that you're now the president of the Alton Ridge PTSA?
Yes, I was elected a couple weeks ago to that organization. They had their.
You made eye contact, didn't you? That's what happened.
Yeah, they had their president seat vacant, and the president from last year didn't wish to continue. So glad to help out where I can in that organization. Thanks.
Great, congratulations. That's a big job.
Okay, this is Renee speaking. So, Ann, you're saying that you would like to see us possibly putting out a survey to see how the parents are dealing with online learning?
Well, I guess
to get some feedback from them.
So I guess, Renee, what I'm really saying is, do you think that your charter covers doing that kind of thing? I guess I'm looking to hear from you guys about whether that's the kind of thing that you would like to undertake, or that, that you could help us build out, or, I'm just kind of looking for some feedback if we have time for that.
So this is TJ. If I could just chime in, I think that this would be a good time for us to sort of unload those types of ideas and let them digest them and discuss them at their own meeting next time, and then maybe report back instead of them trying to answer those questions right away. I think we may do a little bit of formal change to their charter depending on how this process goes. So we shouldn't think of the charter as tying us down or limiting them. If there's different things we'd like to see them doing and they feel and the rest of the council feels that would be something. So in order to keep it moving, if we could just sort of let them know what we're thinking, that might be a little bit more advantageous use of our time. Would that be okay, Councilmember Rabati?
Okay, well, that's what I'm thinking.
Okay, sounds good. I recognize Councilmember Rao, please.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Mayor. I first of all want to reiterate, I want to congratulate the new members. I want to thank everybody for giving their time to this committee. And I also want to thank Councilmember Garamella, whose leadership brought this to us about a year and a half ago. First of all, I want to just support this idea of whatever we can do during this pandemic to support dealing with online education. And I think more than what I would like this committee to do is to do more than just saying that we have challenges, but identify ways we can bring in possibly speakers to talk about the mental challenges. I've been talking to a lot of parents that are really concerned about just what the future of their children's education is going to be. And dealing with 2 weeks into virtual learning, I can tell you for us, it's been really challenging with a high schooler. So maybe bringing in speakers, having some folks that can report back to the council, and then maybe make recommendations on extracurricular activities for families out there so that they can get into a better structure. I want to continue to depend on this committee for the changing careers in an ever-changing economy. Mark Dixon has done a great job hosting some events when he was PTA president on innovation. Parkside Elementary's tagline is empowering through innovation. I know Mark is no longer there, but I think that's a great theme, and that might be something we want to expand beyond just one school. Maybe that's just I'm just throwing you ideas to digest. There's new jobs being created every day, and we want our kids to be prepared. The final thing is data. One thing we've been challenged with as a council is we get a lot of pushback on multifamily development because of the impact on the school system, but quite sometimes don't feel like we're getting real-time data from the school system by the time it hits the planning and zoning process. So that might be something that we can really depend on this advisory committee for, is to make sure that we're leveraging technology, working with our staff, our CIO on smart cities, to make sure that we're getting accurate data so that when we do provide, get these multifamily developments. And the final thing I'll say is that I'm going to depend personally on this committee to make sure that we're getting all of the good news about the school systems and challenges of the school systems to the public. We're getting a lot of Facebook posts, a lot of emails. I don't get the sense that people understand out there in Morrisville. I'm doing a lot of this already as a council member, of the fact that we have Parkside, we had a new high school added in the CIP plan, we've got the Wake Tech Early Career College. These kinds of things have to be put out there, working with our communications officer, so that council isn't continuing debating social media posts and things come out there that say, well, the council's not doing anything with schools, or Morrisville's not doing anything with schools. I know we're living in the social media where people can say and do whatever they want, but I think that's the whole reason we have this committee, is to make sure that you support the great things going on. So, but I want to thank you, and I just would like to see you guys focus in a little bit more when you come back in a few months on, where the kinds of things that you want to come back to and report to us on. But I want to thank you all for your service. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Baramello, please.
Thanks, Mayor. I would also say welcome, and I think this is an excellent forum of having joint meetings between the advisory committees, like the education one today, and we had one before. It's a good platform where we can share our ideas and you guys can share us. So said that, I was thinking a lot coming into this meeting. It was a thought process that started as a roundtable, which ended up as a committee here today, and I'm very thankful to each one on the council for supporting it, and I'm happy that hearing from Mark that the committee itself is also actively participating in all the things. But I kind of go back to what Vicky said, is advisory committees are advisory committees to the town council, and they are our eyes and ears. And when I was thinking, the visioning when the process was going on was more to find out how this committee can bridge the gap between the school issues and the people, because continuous redistricting was going on, and people were didn't know where to go. And I guess, you guys have done a great job in advocating for more schools, and that's excellent. But places where I see you guys can champion are issues, especially during COVID, the issues that all the parents are facing and the kids are facing. If you have plans that you can help the parents and the kids and need the help of the town in any means or shape, or they want to, the kids don't have physical education anymore, they can't go, but you want to kind of partner with the town of Morrisville, Parks and Recs, and other committees that you can do, that would be a good. We have the, youth leadership, and the kids are, looking for volunteering opportunities. How can you bridge that gap? How can you help us to help the parents and the kids safely during these testing times to help and work and move forward? So COVID is obviously, it came on us, but I think you guys can really pick on that and be champions and help us as a role models, because not every city in Wake County has the education committee that you guys have an advantage to be doing something which is really helpful to each one of you. And I don't want to take much time, but I would really like to to thank each one of you for taking the time and effort and thinking and coming up with these plans.
Let's recognize Mayor Pro Tem Johnson at this time, and then Councilmember Fender.
So I also want to thank all the members of the Education Committee for being with us tonight for our first joint meeting. I appreciate all that you are doing on behalf of our citizens and especially our children. So I'm going to repeat just a couple of things. I try not to repeat because you've heard some really good comments from my other colleagues here tonight. But one thing I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. It's really important that we, and when I say we, I mean the council and the committee, are talking with one voice. And so just to repeat a little bit or to emphasize a little bit what Councilmember Garamella said, when he came forward with this idea to create this committee, it was during the redistricting or the reassignment efforts that were going on. And as a council, we really wanted this group to be an advocate for our citizens and our children. And the one item in the charter that really kind of screams out to me is the one line where it talks about that the committee should develop an advocacy plan to address Morrisville's public education needs. So that advocacy plan, as you've heard, is something that would help this council. You would hopefully advise us on that advocacy plan and then advocate on the behalf of our residents and our children. And so a couple of things that come to mind for me, and I don't want to add to a laundry list of things that we want you to do, but that advocacy plan should include looking at and dogging the 7-year CIP that Wake County Public School System has. We have that 44-acre parcel, and just because it's on a plan doesn't mean that it will come to fruition when we want it to. So I would say, to keep an eye on all that, and I know you're already doing that because I've attended some of your meetings and now watched them virtually, but to keep an eye on that 44-acre parcel and make sure it really does become a middle school or a combo middle school, high school for our citizens and our children. And then the early college idea that is possible on Wake Tech's campus. That early college, I mean, that's another item that could be in this advocacy plan. And then the two other things that I think are really important, besides all the other things we heard about, mental health issues and COVID, that's all very important. There will potentially be future reassignments here. And to be on the lookout for that, especially in light of the fact that we are now going through a census. And once that, well, actually, there's two different things. I'm combining them. So future reassignments, and then the other thing is the census process that we're going through now will probably shift the lines of the districts. And I have often in the past talked about the fact that the town of Morrisville for years has not been a part of a district in Western Cary, but rather has been a part of a district that includes North Raleigh. And I have always said that was very unfortunate. This has nothing to do with our current representative. Chris Haggerty does a fabulous job, and he is very responsive and always has been, even when he was our House representative for Morrisville. So I just think that the town of Morrisville, for lots of reasons, and we're short on time tonight, probably fits much better in the Western Cary district versus a North Raleigh district. And I think that's something I would ask you to please put on your radar because that's coming. And you can help us by being, as you've heard, our eyes and ears, and then helping us to understand what's happening in that realm and then how we can all together and with one voice advocate for our citizens. And then one more thing, I've got a laundry list of notes here, but let me, and I know Councilmember Fender's waiting to make some comments. Don't forget that on our town's website, we have a page devoted to Wake County Public School Systems and what is happening there, and that is a resource for our citizens. So I would challenge you and ask you to look at that and use that, as well as to use our staff and our communications department to share information either on that website or through our social media or through our weekly newsletter, email, not a newsletter, but our email. And then, of course, we do have our newsletter that is mailed. So thinking those are tools for you to use to share as you working with our staff, how to empower and engage our communities. So thank you again, all of you, for being here with us tonight.
Thank you. Councilmember Fender?
Thank you. Well, the earlier town council members have pretty much said everything, so I will keep my comments very brief. I'm very grateful for you guys being with us this evening, and I do think that your advisory committee is very, very important to the town of Morrisville. A couple items that struck me as very important that are on your work plan is your committee developing the relationship with the Wake County School Board and the public school system, going to their meetings, and you guys can really be our eyes and ears of things that you hear that are going on that could affect either the residents in the town or staff or town issues. And then also one of the things that based on what Ann was saying and proposing made me think too that we're in our communities and we're listening to people too, but you all can in addition be our eyes and ears of what you're hearing from your neighbors and the residents and what they're dealing with their students. And if there are any ideas that come up out of that the town can help, like provide like a specific after school program. And if there are any services where the town could help, definitely bring those forward to us based on what you're hearing out in your communities. And I'm especially for supporting after school programs and before school programs for working parents. I think that's especially important for many, many moms and dads out there. So thanks for being here.
Thank you, Councilmember Fender. So I will reiterate on last, I think all the council members have had a chance, that about the assignment, which was the impetus for this committee in the first place. If you guys can, if your group can become subject matter experts on the assignment process and which of our neighborhoods maybe are coming up for possible reassignment, because that can happen every 3 years, pending. So that would be very helpful for you guys, for your group to do that. Keep us informed and let us know what might be coming down the pike, so we and our residents are not surprised by any potential reassignments. I really like what Mayor Pro Tem talked about. Census might change some district lines. That might be something that a lot of people don't really think about, but it could definitely affect us. And make sure also that schools, the potential for 2 schools, the 44 and up by Wake Tech, if your group can monitor those and keep an eye on those and become expert on what's going on, where they might go, make sure they don't go sideways on us, make sure that they are being proposed in such a way that will benefit some of our residents at least. The early college might be more of a magnet, so might not help in that way too much. And then also help us determine and advocate for more schools besides those two options. We heard from Betty Parker that they're working on their 7-year plan, but there's always options to insert things in the plan early if we can identify needs and places that might work. So those are the 4 big items that I think are important. I would also support the after-school programs and a lot of things that are already on your work plan that a lot of us did emphasize and go towards. I would say another couple of smaller things that are more on the fun side, which are more of the sides. If you could reach out to Wake Tech, maybe determine if there are any opportunities to collaborate at lower levels, elementary school programming in Morrisville, anything like that. If you want to propose any educational-oriented proclamations and build awareness about things like Walk to School Day, if you want to collaborate with Parks and Rec Department on that, Read Across America Day, things like that. If you're able to track the events, you guys can be embedded in the elementary schools and let us know when there's upcoming events and share opportunities for us to engage more directly with the residents. That's also great. 5Ks, fall festivals, international nights, which are a big thing around town. You are already coordinated and embedded in the PTAs. Many of you already attend the BAC meetings as well. These are all things that are really positive, and we appreciate you already doing those. So at this time, those are the ideas I wanted to share, and I want to thank you again for providing all this information in advance. I'd like to turn it back to Mark for a little bit of reaction, and then there might be some more council members or people on the MPAC committee who want to add a few words from what we heard. Looks like we've got a little over 15 minutes left. So
sure.
Mark.
I saw on the chat that Council Member Rao had just a final comment, so I should let him speak before I go. Go ahead.
Just 10 seconds. First of all, one thing that I forgot to mention was advocacy to the North Carolina General Assembly. So I think it's very important. We do have overcrowded schools, and for this committee to get in tune in terms of, especially after the elections, where the majority is going to be, the reduction in class size and its impact on seats in schools. So we recently heard that at a council meeting. So I think it's very important for this committee to be on top of that issue because it really has a direct impact on our schools. The second thing is the county funding to the commissioners, from the commissioners to the school board. In the middle of a pandemic, it's tough right now, but whatever we can do to get more funding to Wake County schools and future bonds. So I think those are the 3 areas in terms of advocacy. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Mayor, you had a comment as well?
Yeah, I failed to weigh in on the idea of your direct advocacy into the Wake County space and, as Councilmember Rao just mentioned, into the Assembly. I see your group as people who more gather information and build relationships and just make it clear when you're in those settings that you are appointed committee members but not speaking on behalf of that committee or the council or the town at that time. If you want to attend those meetings and speak as a resident, of course you're welcome to do that. And everyone's savvy enough to understand the differences, but you just want to make sure that everyone understands that the town council speaks on behalf of the town in regards to education advocacy directly. But it's important for y'all to build relationships with the people making those decisions so that you can gather the best info and help advise us and make recommendations to us so we can advocate on your behalf. So I just want to share that.
Okay, thanks for the input. I think this would be a good time to maybe clarify that. That was a good segue into, I think, what Councilmember Scroggins-Johnson had mentioned. So early on, our committee had talked about how do we engage with Wake County Public Schools, and in our discussion, we had thought, well, we don't want to have 10 committee members calling Chris Haggerty all the time. So what we have defined may have been misunderstood or we're probably not broadcasting that well. We had assigned committee member Reed to be our voice to gather information from Wake County Public Schools. So, for example, if our committee wanted to go ask Mr. Haggerty a question, it would always come through misread. And it wouldn't be kind of us asking the same question in a bunch of different ways. So I think that we're clear on, as a advisory committee, we'll gather data, and we wouldn't announce anything out to the public. We would really just advise the town council on what our thoughts were, and then let you broadcast, or however you want to broadcast, through your channels. So I think we understand that we're not an autonomous committee that has information flow out of us to the public. So I hope if any one of our committee members wants to clarify that. I don't know if I said that well enough, but I think that moving on, there were some other, let's see, can you go to slide number, 9, 10, 12? So these are some of the projects, and they will align with the work plan as well. But one of the topics that came up was mental health or behavioral health during the pandemic. We have been discussing that, and one of our committee members has taken that project on and has made some progress. I don't think we're ready to release any information yet, but is she on? Let me see the list. I don't know if she could make it tonight.
Mark, she's not on. She's in class tonight.
Okay, all right. So with regard to the comments about how do we, help with the mental health of our students and parents, I think we've talked about that. We've got a formulated plan, but that's certainly on our radar. Let's see. There was some other.
Mark,
chime in. Go ahead.
With the mental health, I also have been working on someone coming in to provide mental health services and coping skills. And I actually meet with him again tomorrow to further discuss and see how he wants to present it to you all. We had started this before the shutdown, and now it's an even bigger need for it. So I would get with the other member in our group that's working on it and see what she has so we can combine our resources and report back to town what is needed to make it happen.
Okay, thanks. And I'd like to give Committee Member O'Connor a few minutes and kind of describe how she's engaged with Wake County Public Schools. She's taken on the task of monitoring the Wake County board meetings.
Sure. I was actually just writing something in the chat because Member Reed and I have split up going to or attending virtually the school board work sessions. They meet twice a month, so one of us attends each time, and then we write up a little summary. So we started sharing those little summaries with the committee members, and I was just writing in the chat box if the council members would like those bi-monthly summaries. I know y'all are inundated with paperwork, so I don't want to swamp you with more things to read. If you think it's helpful, I'll send it, and if you don't, I won't.
We'll just stop reading some random stuff, Betsy.
Yeah, this stuff is so much more exciting. School resource officers, come on. Will they stay in Wake County Public Schools or not? We don't know.
I believe at least some of us would love to read those summaries, so they would not be wasted if you send them on to us. Thank you so much.
Sure. I'll add you to my, or Aaron, you're on the call. How do we do that? Is Aaron on the call? I thought I saw her pretty face earlier.
Yes, she's on here, but she is entering chat comments because she can't be heard on the microphone. So.
Okay. Well, she'll just tell me what to do. So I usually send it to her, and then she disseminates the information to the committee members. So perhaps she can add you all onto that list or send it out separately.
So we will certainly do that. They're included with monthly agendas that go out and meeting minutes and summaries. And then there's also a suggestion that the website that was mentioned earlier is also an excellent place for us to be placing those.
Okay.
Yeah, back to our committee to see if there's a templated format that you'd like to see. And in addition to the Wake County Public School Board meetings, I've reached out to District 7 and District 8 so that we are invited. These meetings are, the Board Advisory Council meetings are open to attend. However, there have been enormous attendance that shut people out in recent past because of the online format. So I've gotten invites for both District 7 and District 8 to get invited to those BAC meetings and not get shut out of the virtual meetings until the time comes where we're back in person. And so since I'm now the leader of the PTSA at Austin Ridge, I will get an automatic invite. So at least one or two of us can attend those meetings moving forward. Let's see. Other activities, I think that I'd like to have some of the other members chime in. This is, I want to include everybody as I can. So go ahead and in the chat. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Ms. Scroggins-Johnson, you had a comment?
Well, actually, Councilmember Robati was first, so I want to give her time, and then I have a brief comment.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Vicki. I just wanted to bounce off what TJ said about fun things. It's such a non-fun time that I guess we don't always, my mind doesn't go in that direction first. But I just wanted to let you guys know that you have my total support. Like, I can judge a science fair. I can read. If you want to start up a story hour, I'll read a story. You know, I mean, I really so enjoyed that kind of stuff when my kids were little. And I would love to be involved in doing really anything that you guys want me to do. Anything that you set up virtually online, consider me involved if you need me. So that's really all I wanted to say.
Okay, great. That's wonderful to hear. Go ahead, Ms. Scroggins-Johnson.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to kind of reiterate my concern about the advocacy appointed person. There is, of course, I have such confidence in everybody attending meetings and gathering information, and the summaries are so brilliant of an idea. But I don't feel comfortable someone going to a school board member on behalf of a committee without the town council knowing what is being said on behalf of the committee. It's almost like the committee can report up to the council or inform the council and ask if they could reach out to the school board member on behalf of the committee. As an individual, you know, you can do almost anything you want, but on behalf of the committee, it's very sensitive. And the town council, just to be fair, the town council is very sensitive about a single council member saying something on behalf of the entire council. We usually check with each other about messaging or about bringing forward ideas to new audiences that have not been vetted before. So it's just a procedural kind of caution that we have, and that is why I think we need to talk about that a little bit more. And we won't have time tonight, but that might be something we can do in the future.
Okay, that's a good comment. I think that would be great to clarify how you'd like us to proceed. And that's probably a good segue into the land use plan document. This is a good example of what I think you're talking about. So you received an additional document about the land use and a request from our committee to Wake County Public Schools to comment on the development that they see. So can we pull that up real quick? Is that part of the package? That would have been, let's see, keep going. Yeah, keep scrolling through. It's the one with the map on it. There it is, right there. So we've had this document for a couple of months now. It is sort of, it's a trial format for how do we communicate with Wake County Public Schools. So this has not gone to Wake County Public Schools. However, I'd be really interested in your comments about this type of communication, where this is the document that we generated. This is what we'd like to send to Wake County Public School District and have specific requests. So in this document, the quick summary is, and by the way, Mr. Brad West has been very open with information to me, so I owe him a lot of credit for his time, and he's been really wonderful for me to engage with. So he's been a great representative of the town as a resource for us. So this document came from our meeting back in March, where Lake County Public Schools says, well, tell us what you're going to do as far as development, and we can probably turn around and like an impact statement on what does that mean for student assignment, or what does that mean for schools. And so this document sort of asks that question. It lays out where the development is, and this is information from the town website, again with the help of Mr. Brad West. It sort of lays out specifically all the development happening and asks Wake County Public Schools to comment on this. So there's really two asks. One is, with all the development you see, what does that mean? And then I could just really read the request to Wake County Public Schools, provide information on the impact of residential growth and change within the town of Morrisville, and we as a committee will strive to submit early information so that Wake County Public Schools can consider us in the decisions that they make. So in addition, and this is kind of an aligning topic, if there is a place for maybe a school that could possibly get built, then this document invites them to comment on that as well. So I'd like to ask kind of specifically, this is an example of a communication that we'd like to send through our committee to Wake County Public Schools to get comments on. So it would go to you first to approve it, and then we go to Wake County Public Schools for comment, and then it would come back to us. So are there any thoughts about how that would work? Does that align with what you were talking about, Ms. Scroggins-Johnson?
It's the procedure, yes, that would be appropriate. This topic, though, I'm wondering if this is something staff already does. Did Brad kind of advise you to that, and when they would be providing that, or is this a unique ask?
Good question. That came up in our last discussion, where there was a comment made from one of our committee members that said, well, doesn't the town planning folks already do this? And we did have, I think, some dialogue around that. We haven't finished our dialogue. That's why you haven't seen this officially. But I think it focuses in and is very direct on, we as the Morrisville Public Education Advisory Committee are singularly focused on public education. We are not focused on economic growth. We're not focused on inviting folks to want to live in the town of Morrisville. We are not focused on housing options for the residents. All of that goes away, and we're only focusing on here's the development in Wake County Public Schools. What does that mean? And so I think this could be a valuable tool where perhaps in some ways this information has gone to Wake County Public Schools, but this really gets very directly to the heart of it and asks them very direct and specific questions to comment on. So the short answer to the question is it could be, and maybe this document isn't necessary. So that's two reasons.
Okay, so I am next to comment. So I would say the concept is good, but I would like to hear from Michelle if this is not getting done, because I have asked this before, and we have talked to the school board. They clearly said all those calculators, it's not just a subdivision, it is by the, how many bedrooms and the occupancies, and everything gets reported, and that's how the forecastings are done. So that is actually a role of the planning that they have a continuous channel of how it is, because you could have this document, it will be irrelevant in a month. And they continuously keep those calculators. Brad has done an excellent job. I've seen some of the documents. It looks like apartment by apartment, house to a single home, and how many occupancy, more in terms of the bedrooms and their calculators. So I even though I think it's a good ask, but I think I like the ask going from the town staff and getting us back the information if they have any comments. But this is purely the role of the town staff to do it. And also, Mark, on one of the slides, you said a survey, right? MECS survey, like, was the survey within your committee members, or was it given to the people to comment on those work plans that you guys are working on?
The survey was really just for our committee only.
Okay, because it would be, see, the things where you could really help us is take the same survey back and, you know, ask the people of Morrisville, you know, what they think, so that we can get the real pulse out. So that would be also very helpful for you guys to lead the next, you know, kind of decision making.
So that was in our discussion from our last session, where I encouraged all of our members to reach out to their neighborhoods and ask, what are your concerns? So I certainly will reiterate that. And I think that's good to continue reiterating that at each meeting. So I appreciate your comments.
This is PJ. I'm just going to chime in real quick. We're looking to wrap this up, essentially pause this discussion, and we look forward to meeting with your group again sometime in the future. There's been some talk in the chat about changing the charter given this discussion. I think, I believe personally that the charter is good, and if you all are hearing something that you'd like to add to the charter, if you want to make a suggestion about changing some words or adding a bullet, I think bringing that back to us would be appropriate from what you've heard from us tonight. So I just wanted to share those two things. There was another comment about the UDO. That's something that you guys can discuss with staff, and if you want to make some kind of recommendations, your job is to make recommendations to us. So if you feel like it might be within your purview, and if you feel that's a good use of your time, go ahead and talk about it amongst your group and then bring it forward. I see Mayor Pro Tem Johnson has a comment. So we're looking to wrap this up. So if anyone has anything that can really help direct this committee and give them the direction and guidance they're looking for, we'd love to hear that at this time. Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mayor. I know we did say we'd keep this to an hour, so I agree with you. I think we need to continue this conversation. I think we have a lot. We've all shared some really good information tonight. I think we all can kind of digest it a little bit, and I do think we need to come back and have some further discussion. I just wanted to comment real quickly on this last document that we're talking about, and I do think it's really important to make sure that you are utilizing our staff. Our staff does this kind of work already, and so I would say funnel these requests through our staff to make sure. My concern would be I would not want to frustrate the school board staff with undue work. That work that's already being done. So that's one thing. And then the other thing I just want to say real quickly about this document, the land that's been identified in these different areas across town, you know, we're all really well aware of that already at council level and staff level. I would advocate there are some other areas to look at, and I would highly advocate that there are some opportunities for reuse and redevelopment. And I don't want to lose that part of the conversation about citing new schools in Morrisville. So anyhow, so Mayor, you're right. We need to wrap up, and I think there's more to come. I think we can come back and delve a little more and probably help each other out a little more for sure.
Also, Ms. Hudson noted in the chat that These documents that we've been referencing have been attached to the online agenda if the public would like to take a look at them in more depth at their convenience. I'll pass it back to you, Mark, for some closing remarks.
Yeah, I don't have anything else to add. I really appreciate the time for everybody that's taken for us, and I think we'll take all these comments. I've got my notes, and of course we have the video to look back on. We'll take this back to our meeting. I think we meet next week, and we will digest what we heard and come back and refine perhaps our work plan. And I think that you'll probably see some engagement with maybe some requests for clarification about some of the comments to make sure that we're on the right track with how we move forward. So that's it for me.
And hopefully you've got some affirmation of some things that are already in your work plan. So hopefully that is helpful. Okay. And I think everyone already thanked you. On behalf of the town and staff and all the residents, we really appreciate your time and efforts. This whole committee is a great thing, and we're very glad that you are part of the town's efforts on supporting schools. Thank you all very much.
You bet.
Okay. At this time, we're going to go right into our next work session. And that is going to be draft land use plan work session part 2. This will be Brad West, again, working to
Can't tell if I froze or the mayor froze.
Did TJ freeze?
He might have froze.
I think the mayor froze.
Yeah. Can you type in something for me?
Nick, if you want to share your screen so you can walk through the plan, that we can get that started, and hopefully the mayor can rejoin us. If you can hear me, Nick.
Yep.
Okay. While the mayor's getting back online, this is just a continuation of the last work session we had on the 25th. You all were given an overview of the draft land use plan. Now we're going to move into discussing 5 key policy issues within the plan. And so we're going to be tackling the general future land use map. We're going to be tackling the TOD East, the town center, the McCrimmon extension area, and then also, if we have time, the airport noise overlay. I understand Alice Caden with RDU has been gracious enough to join us to offer their perspective on the noise overlay and give you some information related to that. So that could spill over into that conversation if it needs to. We also have time on the 21st of September to discuss any spillover topics or from conversations from tonight, but also really try to save the 21st for more general policy discussion aside from those 5 key areas. And again, the reason why we select these 5 is they have ripple effects throughout the document. And so we really want to ensure that we get some buy-in from you all on some of the key considerations in each of those topic areas. We're going to ask that you kind of take a broad view, really look at the key considerations, try not to get caught up in the weeds with certain issues, especially when we get to the concept designs for the sub areas. A lot of this stuff is just visual aids and guidance. What we really want from you all is just buy-in for the key policies that Household Lean is recommending. So, Nick, I don't know if you want to jump right in and start with the future land use map, but I'll let you take over.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks, Brad. Thanks, everybody, for giving us an opportunity to come back and pick back up where we left off from the presentation 2 nights ago. And tonight, hopefully, a lot more talking from your side of the webcam and just getting your feedback, your comments. Let us know what you think about the draft they have in front of you. And like Brad said, we have 5 key policy areas that we want to have a discussion about tonight. The first part is the land use plan and the land use designation. For the most part, the land use plan is very similar to the land use plan that we had presented months back to couple of different groups. We worked through it with staff. We worked through it with PGB. We also worked through it with town council. And I mean, for the large part, there weren't any major changes that came out of those discussions or major revisions. It was more fine-tuning into the underlying policies that we've been talking about for these 13 land use designations. So I don't know if you recall, we broke these down into 6 sectors and kind of walked through systematically the areas that we wanted to talk about, what those new uses might look like, why they were going that way or that policy way. So with that, I think, to the best that we can, looking at this map, are there any broad questions or any broad, I guess, issues that you want to address now as it relates to the land use?
Brad, would you like to facilitate the comments, or would you like me to do that, sir?
I'd prefer you to do it, and I can just chime in if you don't mind.
I'd like to recognize Councilmember Pender, please, for a comment, and then Councilmember Rabat.
Yes, 2 things on this. If we are talking about the categories, 2 of the areas I think my suggestion would be to redefine 2 of these sections. One is the medium density residential category. I have a real problem with that one allowing both single family detached and townhomes, because that makes it really difficult in deciding whether to assign a specific area with that category. And because I think, a lot of the residents, as you know, don't want to see more apartments right now, and townhomes are in that same category as well. So, like for some of these areas like Holly Creek being zoned medium density residential, I have an issue with that. I don't want to see townhomes and houses. It needs to be one or the other. The other category, neighborhood activity center. I understand the goal of the neighborhood activity center designation. It's to, get a livable, workable, multi-use area of town with shops and, other retail restaurants and some apartments. But however, the way things are coming out, the reality is that we end up with just apartments, and that defeats the purpose of that category to begin with. So I think, between the neighborhood activity center, regional activity center, and business activity center, there needs to be one of those that includes, townhomes, restaurants, whatever, but doesn't include multifamily residential. So that's the 2 points of feedback that I have for this page.
Okay. I'll just quickly chime in and let Nick chime in after. So what I understand, the medium density general land use category really was sort of built off what was recommended in the 2009 plan. We haven't changed much, and it's similar to what, if you had to have a zoning equivalent, it's similar to what our MDR zoning district is, which allows for both single family, detached and attached products. So those were sort of the foundation, I think, in having both attached and detached products. It even recommends the same density that our current zoning ordinance recommends. So that would be a pretty significant change if we if we broke medium density out into medium density single family detached and then medium density single family attached. So I just wanted to note that. One thing I forgot to do, and I promised the mayor I would do this, was recap planning and zoning board's considerations for you all to take into account for each topic area. So real quick, the main consideration they wanted you all to take into account for this particular topic area, and you mentioned it earlier with Holly Creek, was the designation given to Holly Creek in this future land use map. We're showing it as medium density residential, which right now, as it stands, would allow for both single family attached and single family detached. As you can see in the map, I know it's probably a little hard to read on a small screen, but they would like to change that to all neighborhood activity center, which at this point would, to your point, Member Fender, allow for apartments. And so we, as staff and the consultants, are not necessarily in agreement with that. We think it needs to the density needs to sort of taper down as it gets closer to the residential area in Cary. I know there's some controversy whether or not that should be a factor in Morrisville's land use planning, but we feel that adjacent uses are important, whether or not they're in Morrisville or Cary. And so that's something that we use as justification for that. Now, Nick, I don't know if you have anything else to say about MDR.
No, I just want to be, and I do want to be cautious about what we're talking about tonight is the future land use plan. We're not talking about the underlying regulatory zoning districts. So this is still policy. This isn't.
But these are the details that matter to us. I mean, I can't. I mean, we're gonna have to get into the weeds, or we can't agree on the policy. These are the details that matter to us, and there's gonna be cases where we're gonna have to get down into the weeds.
Yeah.
And I'll leave a comment with the medium density designation, that just because it was that way in 2009 doesn't mean that we can't change it. For me, it's for looking at designating any area medium density, it's a real problem because we know the residents really do, and we can't sustain more townhomes and multifamily apartments. And that's a huge concern to residents in our town.
So this will not allow for any apartments.
But it allows for townhomes.
It does, but I think we keep interchanging. I'm hearing apartments and townhomes used interchangeably, and they are two very different products. I just want to make sure that
And I understand that. What I'm saying is I'm saying in general that the residents do not want more townhomes and apartments, but the medium density residential includes detached and attached, which are townhomes.
Correct.
Did you have anything else that you wanted to share, Councilmember Fender?
No, that's it.
Okay, I'll recognize Councilmember Rabati and then Councilmember Scoggins-Johnson, please.
Yeah, I'm basically going to say the same thing that I said when we first saw this land use plan, which is that I don't see any connection between this plan and what I'm hearing from the residents that they want. And that deeply concerns me. What I hear from people is that they're upset by the amount of people we keep adding to Morrisville when we don't have enough schools, we haven't done the road projects, and to me, like to start looking at this as being what I don't know what this giant blob of orange over here is, but, I don't know if like that's neighborhood activity center, but I see, neighborhood activity center, I see thank you, that's very helpful. I see some high density residential, and I just don't think that this is what the residents want. And further, I don't think that it's really aligned with what we're hearing about what they want the vision for our town to be. And I'm very concerned about that. And I understand what you're saying, Nick, about, this is just the overall policy and this is, this isn't zoning, but in fact, this is going to drive zoning, am I wrong about that? Because it seems to me that from what I understand, once something is zoned, let's say neighborhood activity center, to Councilmember Fender's point. If we zone something neighborhood activity center and a developer brings us a project that fits within those tenets of a neighborhood activity center, we don't have a lot of wiggle room in whether or not we can approve that project. So we do have to be careful here. And I'm just looking at the map and I'm very concerned.
Yes, again, I'll chime in and Nick will follow up. So I don't know if you had an opportunity to look at the future land use map highlights sheet that was included in the binder that I quickly left in your doorstep. But one of the considerations that was made, so you're absolutely right. We've heard from a lot of folks that want to stop all growth whatsoever, all residential development, just full stop. And we understand that. We've heard that multiple times from people. We also heard that we're not opposed to growth, but we don't want it affecting our single-family areas. We like the way our single-family neighborhoods look and feel, and we don't want apartments next to us. We're not opposed to apartments being built somewhere. We just don't want it near our neighborhood. So that's another thing we've heard. We've also heard from engagement from the development community, which is another channel of engagement and input that we receive. The multifamily product is in terms of it being built out, is underserved. They feel like there isn't enough multifamily. We're in the middle of a region of 2.1 million people. You guys have to understand that we have a tremendous amount of housing demand for all these job centers nearby, and we feel that you all are being too restrictive on where we can build that. And you heard some of those comments made on the 25th. So what we've done and what House Levine has tried to balance is, okay, so we have these two opposing viewpoints, and then somewhere in the middle is there a compromise. And so what you're noticing on the map is we've tried to shift a lot of the higher density uses. When I say higher density, like narrow lot, single family development, or in most cases apartments, maybe townhomes, over more, but mostly apartments, more towards the eastern side of Morrisville, where they're getting major road improvements, the infrastructure that serves developments like that, where they're away from existing single family neighborhoods, and then where they're right next to proposed transit systems. And so that infrastructure, to a lot of folks' points, building without infrastructure, that's the infrastructure that would serve higher density residential. So what this plan aims to do is shift that higher density to those facilities while relieving the single family areas that have sort of been inundated with other encroaching development. A lot of folks, especially in the northwest of town, in Breckenridge and Kitts Creek, they feel like their single family neighborhoods are being encroached upon by apartments and other higher intensity development. Some of it's in Cary. We've had to clarify that the Wegmans and things like that are in Cary. Our borders are a little zigzaggy, so that's understandable. So that, I'm just trying to translate the map as best I can to you. But Nick, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
I guess going back to one of the original statements again, it is trying to provide a balance between the growth that is happening in the region, the growth that you're already seeing in Morrisville, and providing some guidance on where specific land uses, or generally where you could be flexible on the types of land uses, would be appropriate. So that is what we're trying to accomplish inside the future land use map.
I understand that, but what we have here, I think, is a fundamental difference of opinion on whether Morrisville has, in fact, already contributed more than its share of high and medium density housing to the market surrounding us. I think that I guess I just disagree that it's our job to provide housing just because there's a need for housing. I think we have to do what's best for our town, and then secondarily discuss what's good for people that aren't even in our town.
So are you saying no extra housing whatsoever? Is that what I'm hearing?
No, I'm definitely not saying that. I guess that I'm just disappointed that I don't see more of the product like when I moved to Morrisville, and that was only 7 years ago, you could buy a really nice house in Morrisville, a small, but a nice house for about $250,000. That product is gone. And I miss it, and I think there's a real need for that product. But I don't see that anywhere.
So that's an interesting point. So when you see the medium medium density, the higher density residential, especially on the western side of town, I know people immediately fixate on apartments, like that's an a preferred use. It also means narrow lot, single family detached units like you have in Kitts Creek. You know, most of Kitts Creek is high density residential, whether people realize that or not. And so the smaller lot, single family homes typically do sell at a lower price point because there's not as much land. And so if you feel that there's areas of town where you could see, you know, quote, higher density, but you want it as single family detached, or maybe you could conceive some type of townhome project if it looked and felt a certain way, that's something that we can specify in the plan. We can, you know, this is just colors on a map, but we can then follow up with more info.
Okay, so I guess, my question, Brandon, is like, do we need, at this point, a category or a color over here that would specify, not townhomes, not apartments, but single family, narrow, you know, whatever it was that you just said? Do we need a color on this map, or do we do that at the zoning point? Or I know I'm taking way more than my time. And
no, that's fine. These are great questions. So we, and Nick has always recommended, this is Al Levine's approach with most communities, that you leave it general now, and then as development comes in incrementally, you rezone it, maybe through conditional rezoning, you articulate the kind of product you're looking for. Now, it's all voluntary, right, because we can't impose single-family design standards on folks due to recent state statutes. So working with, but that doesn't, you know, if you don't have a product that meets your needs, let's say you want an affordable single-family lot, small lot type development, you don't have to rezone it. You just say, no thanks, we're going to leave it very low density or whatever it's zoned now, and it's totally within your control.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is an important distinction, and one that you have to reconcile inside your UDO. You're now setting the stage for what uses could happen here. So in this area, you're not saying by right these uses will happen here. That's something inside the UDO that you need to be very, very deliberate about the decision. So I understand the want to get into the weeds. I again would stress this is not an in the weeds discussion or map. The in the weeds discussion will be informed by the policy that we talk about here when you're updating your UDO. But when you update your UDO, that's where you start getting into, yes, we say in our plan that we would like to see either single family detached or single family attached. By right, single family detached. Conditional use depending on proximity to a primary road, or like there's other factors that you could put in that would allow for then single family attached to occur. But it wouldn't be a blanket statement of single family detached this entire area. That's not the intent of what we're showing the land use designation. But again, there's a reason that these are separated, is you have to establish a policy across the board. I understand everything that everybody's saying today. I really do, and I want to stress that Brad and I have had this conversation many, many times. We've had this conversation with staff. We've had this conversation with people from the public. But today, this map is about policy. It is high level. You will have this conversation, and you will have to work through this when you amend the UDO. And I encourage the conversation to happen there with as much of this dialogue back and forth, because that is where this becomes regulatory. And that's where you make the definition between by right, I can do this, or there's a couple of things you need to accomplish before you're able to get that type of product on this site.
Okay. Yeah, so if you want an MDR townhome and an MDR single family, or an HDR single family and HDR, we can do that. You know, like member Fender was saying, you know, is there a way we could break that up? You know, we prefer to leave it general here, and then when you get to the actual UDO where it counts, you know, the actual regulations, we could certainly explore.
Yeah. But we have no plans to update the UDO anytime soon that we know of.
Yeah, you must update your UDO when this plan is adopted. That is like, of the hundreds of things we're going to list that you need to do, you must update your UDO.
Right, they need to go together.
Yeah, but everything we would talk about here would be, this would be a superficial conversation if it's not updating your UDO. So there's a lot of other plans that we'll talk about that are important or should be considered, but amending your UDO, either a wholesale update or at least amending your district is critical, which is why we're trying to stay close to the underlying zoning districts that exist, So that is why this, and I fully understand this can be, we're convoluting it a little bit by using similar names, but they are not the same. Not yet. Now, someday when you get into the zoning and you update that code, there will be similarities here, but someone might read this plan and think, oh, all of this could be this. And it's like, well, that's really not the case. There's some proximity. There's a functional or frontage-based approach inside the zone. There's a lot of different ways you're going to be able to manage this inside the UDO.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, if it's okay, I'm going to recognize Planning Director Stiegel real quick in case she has some clarification on what we just heard, and then I'm going to go right to Councilmember Scoggins-Johnson, who's in the queue. Ms. Stiegel?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And I'll abbreviate my comments because I think a lot of it was just covered in that prior conversation, and it was a good conversation. When I do look at this map, though, you know, a lot of the NAC is already developed. A lot of what is shown as medium-density residential is already developed. I would suggest there is a map kind of later on in this document that points out what parcels are vacant. Because when we're dealing with the already developed pieces, and the fabric in those areas in a lot of ways has already been set. But we have the Holly Creek neighborhood, we have property kind of in the Louis Stevens area, some on Church Street. I would encourage you, as you're having this conversation and kind of thinking through these things, to focus on those pieces where development is still coming, and kind of consider the larger overarching question and discussion that all of you just had, as well as, you know, those specific sites, what's adjacent to them, railroads, highways, other uses, and you know, as we work through this with all of you, if you do have specific recommendations on specific parcels, particularly those vacant ones, I think that would be very useful.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Stiegel. Now I'd like to recognize Councilmember Scoggins-Johnson and then Mayor Pro Tem Johnson.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I'd like to kind of share where I feel like I am and maybe some of the other council members are. We are thinking in terms of zoning, and you're talking tonight mostly about policy, but zoning is very important and top of mind for us because we've been through rather rigorous rezoning over the last couple meetings and become very familiar with what is by right and what is with a conditional rezoning. So we really want to get it right with the zoning categories as we look at these maps, because our thinking is of the developed properties, some of those properties came out unexpected. A lot of the properties that are neighborhood activity center are very heavy in apartments. Of the commercial properties, there is the potential for apartments in every single one of those categories. So we have been looking at this and saying, how do we manage this better? How do we have by right development with more consistency and more expected results? And that's why you're getting questions. And I'm going to throw in my perspective on zoning just to that end. The medium density residential category, I live in a medium density zoned area. My neighborhood in Savannah has single family homes, but adjacent to our neighborhood is the new neighborhood Thornberry, and that is medium density residential, which will have single family homes as well as townhomes. So that is being developed in alignment with the medium density residential guidelines as they are today. And frankly, the medium density residential is meant to be transitional between low density and high density. Many neighborhoods have both a high density designation as well as a medium density designation. In fact, medium density does allow for ADUs, accessory dwelling units. And so I don't think it's bad to have that medium density residential designation, and I'm okay with it having townhomes because it's supposed to be transitional. We are pretty close together in a medium density residential neighborhood. It feels almost high density in a way, but yet it is a single family home in which I live today. So just a little bit of clarification on medium density and from somebody that lives in one, what it kind of feels and looks like. But my concern about neighborhood activity center and residential activity center is that we don't get the mix that we expect. I would like to see something changing in the future, and this goes to the UDO language, is percentages. Can we say you can have no more than X percentage of any single category, so we force a mix of 2 to 3 uses. Today they could put possibly all apartments if they wanted, or apartments in a handful of stores, but we really are looking for that mix, and how do we guide that by right in order to get the expected outcome we had hoped for. Also, can we create a new zone? I would like to see a commercial zone without any residential, because maybe it's an institutional use or something, but there are places where it really is not appropriate to have residences, and that might be some places in the airport overlay and so forth like that, but we don't have a choice today. I just feel like we either have commercial with, apartments are considered commercial, so how do we get that more granularity? And then getting back to your land use map as a policy, I'm thinking we're going to have to dig in a lot to the McCrimmon corridor, because I think that the airport overlay is very important, and residential living in that area is very sensitive to me, and I'm not really sure it's where it needs to be. I think everybody needs to talk about that and figure out what is the best kind of mix for that area. So
can I respond to those?
Sure.
So in reverse order, we're going to come back to the McCrimmon's extension in 2 different discussions. So I think I am hoping that we are going to fully vet that area out.
Yeah.
The commercial without residential, I believe, would be general commercial, which is also a commercial district that you have. If that's something you would like to see more of, that's certainly something we could talk about. And I think one of the, trying to be cautious with the way I use that word, what's the right word? A hesitancy about the terminology and the land use designations being similar to the zoning district. It does imply that you have no other options when you get to zoning. You could certainly, out of this land use policy, identify additional zoning districts that don't exist now. That's feasible. That might be something you decide to do. It might be something that accomplishes half of what you want to do in one land use designation and half in another. Those are discussions you can have. And then certainly when you get to the UDO, there's a lot of creative ways to get the mix of uses you want to see. So it could be percentage, it could be frontage based, there's a lot of different things that you can do. And I think that would be something you would want to explore through the UDO refinement process.
Perfect. Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Johnson, please.
So help me here just a minute, Brad. I need to understand, once we adopt this land use plan, are we or are we not going to do a townwide rezoning?
So in the past, I think you were around for the UDO and how that went. So we had that 2009 land use plan. We had 2 giant gray blob areas in the 2009 land use plan, one for McCrimmon Extension, one for Town Center. And we did some subsequent things that were named, I think it was called 2 Plans and a Code is what Ben Hitchings at the time named it. To fill those in, kind of quick, like here's some quick and dirty small area plans so that we can get into the zoning for that. So we revisited all that. We encapsulated all those previous plans, Town Center Plan, McCrimmon Development Guide, and then McCrimmon Transit Plan into this new single document. So those are all folding in here. In the past, before we had a lot of our single-family design regulations kind of stripped from us by the state legislature, we had a lot more control what single-family housing in townhomes looked like. Where the garages were oriented with the facade treatments. We could get into some details. Now that's been removed since then. I think it was 2016 or so when that took effect. And so now what we find are a lot of municipalities aren't doing townwide rezonings. They're leaving things zoned fairly low or density or whatever the case is, industrial, whatever. But usually in relation to residential, they're leaving it like low density or very low. And then as development incrementally comes in, typically through conditional rezoning discussions, you can kind of articulate what you're looking for. And then most of the time, not always, but most of the time, the developer will be willing to work with the community to try to present a project that meets the goals of the land use plan or your goals as a council. And so my quick answer is no, you don't have to do a townwide rezoning.
Yeah. Okay. And I don't think that wouldn't necessarily be our recommendation. There might be things that you might want to go back and tweak some of the permitted uses versus, like there are some of those things you want to reevaluate, but I don't envision a blanket rezoning. There just might be some specific districts that need a little bit more help than others.
Okay, that was the right answer, by the way. So you've given me great comfort because to all of the concerns you've heard, and I'm not going to repeat them. They're all valid concerns you've heard.
Sure.
Doing that townwide rezoning would be disastrous because that would we would lose all control. So I'm happy to hear we're still kind of in the driver's seat here, and we still have a great deal of control. So
definitely.
Okay, so that's good. That makes me feel good. So then, talking about these different districts, how do we handle, the example that we're all using right now about do we need to add a couple of different medium density residential districts? How do we deal with the non-conforming then uses, or would there be non-conforming uses? Are these districts designed so that you capture the current zoning that's out there already?
So what would likely happen, Nick, will chime in after me, but what would likely happen is that we'd recommend you leave them general now in the plan, use it as a guide where, high density could mean 3 different types of things. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then once you get into the actual code, zoning districts and the zoning map, you can create new districts that you want, specifically, if you want an only townhome district, you can do that if you like. And if you have a specified density that you're looking for there, you can also add that in. And then you can delineate already existing areas in that, to match up with the existing area. This is kind of what we did with the UDO when it first came out. Courtney sat there and just drew over areas that were already existing and made sure those districts allowed those types of uses, right? And so, but for the undeveloped areas, you would so leave them general in the land use map. But then, if you don't want to upzone them, don't upzone them. Don't rezone. So, like, we have some areas that are lower density right now. I think in the western side of town near Kitts Creek and Breckenridge. You feel free to leave those low or very low density for now, and then when a developer comes in, they may have a high-density residential product they're pitching, or medium, whatever the land use plan shows, but it's small lot, single-family or something like that, which people might be a lot more comfortable with. But you'd have ultimate control over approving that. I mean, it's totally up to you. And through the conditional rezoning process, you can get, a character and a feel that you're looking for.
Basically, you would be, it's an unnecessary procedure. You just avoid an unnecessary procedure, one that you'll undertake when the development occurs, and that's the appropriate time. Plus, it puts a little bit more pressure on, you got to adhere to the to the land use plan, you got to come into alignment with other issues, so that's the right time to address that problem.
Okay, and just to remind everybody, we have great leeway when it comes to rezoning. We can say no.
Right.
And just say no and move on. so there is that ultimate control over making sure what is rezoned is what meets the needs of our citizens and our residents. So, okay, that's good. So then I did want to ask about conditional rezoning because we're seeing a lot of that already anyhow. Folks are coming in and conditioning all over the place. So can we somehow in the interim, because there's a lag here, there's going to be a lag between the adoption of this land use plan and the update of the UDO. And I need to understand what that time frame may or may not look like. So that's one question. And then in that interim period, is there a way we can be very clear that conditional zoning may be the way y'all are going to have to go?
Yeah, I mean, if there's strategic areas where you think that might be beneficial, yeah, I mean, we can. If there's an area that you like, we know there's certain areas of town that developers are very interested in, and so if you want to preemptively do something or leave it alone and just handle it through the conditional zoning process, we can do either one. I mean, it's I don't know if Michelle has any different opinion about that, but it's totally up to you, totally in your control.
So would that be a part of this document, though, or is that like a separate kind of?
That would need to be separate. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you can go as far as there's some communities when they do this, they put a moratorium on any development. I mean, you have that capacity if you want to. It's definitely a political decision you have to make if you want to put this all on hold, or if you want to guide development between now and when this plan is adopted, and then you make the refinement or the updates to UDO, knowing full well that this is the direction it's going. Yeah, there's definitely mechanisms you can put in place. It wouldn't be here. It's not adopted yet. There's really not much this could do. But yeah, certainly that's something you could work with internally.
Okay, and what is that lag time, do you think, before you get to a UDO update? Because that's pretty big.
Yeah, we're looking at 1.5 to 2 years between adoption of the plan and the UDO being updated to match the plan. So there definitely is a lag in that respect. And we are going to want to have some conversations with all of you, about what we proactively rezone and what we don't. As Senior Planner Wes indicated, there's some strategy there. There's some pros and cons there. I think on September 22nd, we're specifically talking to you about the McCrimmon area and what we might want to do there. So yes, and we are definitely planning on doing the UDO update, but there will be a lag. It will take some time.
Okay, that's going to be important to understand what we can do in that time frame. That's going to be there, especially over in McCrimmon as well. I mean, there are several areas in town. Okay, and I'm sorry, I'm taking a lot of time too, but two more really quick things that I need to get in. The vacant map, the map that shows the parcels that are vacant, is there some way we can overlay that with the future land use map so we can be clear about what you're proposing on that vacant map? And if that's already somewhere, I've missed it. But
it's to answer your question, that is, we can do that. One of the things that I would recommend once we come closer to an agreement about what this land use plan is trying to accomplish, you could do what I would call it's like a land use plan UDO alignment, and you would show the underlying zoning as it is now. You would show the proposed use, and you would see where it's in conflict, where it's in alignment, where there might not be any change. And then you could even further on down the line, you're going to start doing like a nonconformities analysis. Like you'll have a very clear understanding of where there might be some challenging parcels or the underlying zoning needs to change based on the policy that's in this plan. Typically that happens after this document, but at a minimum we could overlay vacant parcels with a boundary, and you could see what uses are being recommended. That's something I could work on with Brad for sure.
I think that would be helpful, quite frankly. And I will tell you, so I've been going back and forth between these three maps, and even and I'm not asking you to do that for me, but I get it. I've got to go back and forth a lot, but because the vacant properties are going to require us to give them, very thorough thought, that might be helpful. And then just lastly, and I'm going to say this really quick, and I won't even go into detail, but I like with the residential districts, you talk about density, and that's really clear about units per acre. I have a hard time when I'm looking through the neighborhood activity center, the business activity center, the regional activity center, understanding, and maybe I just need to read it again, but understanding how the different kinds of densities that we might see in those three areas, or maybe they're all the same and just different mixes. I don't know, but I'm struggling with that a little bit. The pictures help, but quite frankly, the pictures look kind of all the same too. So anyhow, that's just and actually I lied. One more thing, because I want to echo this. We have to somehow figure out a way, and I know you already said you're working on this, but I want to echo it, how to get that mix of uses in these districts. That is very frustrating, that we have not been able to do that. I shouldn't say that. We have done it in certain locations across town. Grace Park is a fabulous example, but there are other areas where we were not able to do that, and that is very frustrating. That's all I have now.
We hope that. I mean, that's probably going to be the hardest thing to do in the UD. I mean, that is very important. That is very important. But to Nick's point, that'll be the biggest UDO item probably you guys tackle when that zoning item comes forward.
Yeah. We do plan to specifically dive into that in some detail with all of you, assuming we're looking at multifamily on McCrimmon. We are planning on trying to flesh that out some more.
Thank you.
So we have a little over 10 minutes left, and we still haven't heard from 3 council members. So I'll recognize Councilmember Rao, then I'll go, and we'll see if any other council members who haven't spoken want to. So Councilmember Rao.
Thank you. I think a lot of what I was going to say has already been said, but I just want to take a chance to address 3 areas for the council to consider. First of all, I think that long term, I think any land use plan has to incorporate what our vision is for the town, 10, 12, 20 years out. And so I think we've always been excited about transit. And I think multifamily would make more sense, higher density in these transit areas on McCrimmon, especially as we evaluate a town center. And I think that's something that we need to consider for the future areas of Morrisville that we're going to be building in. But we have to balance that concern with a lot of the rezonings we get for more and more multifamily. And I think that's the healthy balance. We've had a lot of conditional rezonings over the last few years, and sometimes I don't know whether that just means the land use plan was not keeping up to date with what the market wanted, so every time a zoning came back, they would have to do a conditional rezoning. So hopefully, if we do this right, we won't have to rezone conditional all the time. People can just develop what they are zoned for. The second point that I would make is the midst of a pandemic. There's a lot of uncertainties right now. Economically, they're saying this thing could drag out another, 3 or 4 or 5 quarters. We don't know what revenues are going to be like. We don't know how those declining revenues are going to affect transit. The transit referendum that the Wake County voters voted on in 2016, now they're saying the revenues are so down, it may not even be going into effect until 2030 or 2035. So it's going to really affect, I think, our vision of, what do we want to do? And also from an economics perspective, as I talk to developers, what I hear is that a mixed-use multifamily development is going to yield much greater economic return, almost 15 to 20 times more than just a single-family plot. So that's something that we need to think about as well as we get near to build out. Do we walk away from development that could yield more revenue coming in, which is going to help our citizens so we don't have to increase their taxes when that time comes, where the only way we're going to be able to bring in revenue is when we have to do redevelopment. And the final thought is an uncertainty, and it's something I'm not sure about, is I've been reading a little bit about this of whether COVID-19 is going to impact density, because in highly dense areas, you might have an easier spread of disease. And our apartment's going to look very different, just like offices are going to look very different. Or is it more of a high density look and feel, a more walkable community going to make it easier for people to go shopping, to go, to their healthcare facility, which could reduce disease. But I do think that pandemics, this is one pandemic, but, they're saying that we could get more over the next few years, which is something we don't want to even imagine. But I think that's something that, from a policy perspective, none of us ever imagined we're going to have to think about. So I think it's really coming up with a healthy balance as we develop this vision together, retaining that small town feel and not rezoning everything like Councilmember Bender said, multifamily high density, maybe a separate zoning designation, maybe reducing the percentage of multifamily in those areas where it's not going to make sense, like a town center or transit. So those are just some of my thoughts as we go through this process. Thank you for giving me the time.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. Did staff want to respond to any of those, or should I?
I think those are good points. I think, to reiterate, I think that what Housing is trying to do is focus multifamily in key areas, mainly the sub areas. We could maybe consider doing it even more if there's areas around town that you absolutely do not want to see more multifamily. Let us know, and we can perhaps alter the land use map that way. But also know that we're accommodating it in some of these areas, but not necessarily saying it must happen. This is still should, or could, or would. It's again, when you get to the UDO, you get to make some of those final decisions about, okay, it could happen here, but this must happen here. Like this use we absolutely will encourage. There are other uses that need to meet other criteria, and that's a discussion you'll be able to have then, too. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Brad. I just want to make sure that's clear. I don't want to lose sight of that. I struggle with that, too, with the mixing zoning with land use, and they're two separate things, and I frustrate them all the time. But, yeah, that's a great point. Thank you, Nick.
Yeah. North Carolina consistency statements make that even come to the forefront more.
Yes, it is it is a very different way to do land use plans and zoning, that's for sure. So I understand the conversation. We would normally never talk about zoning this much, but I understand the issue here, or the many issues. So I think just trying to work through these and know that I do believe this land use plan puts you in a position. I feel like Councilman Rao said it really well. This needs to balance a lot of different uses, and certainly with some of the challenges that we're facing right now and what we could be facing in the future, flexibility does need to be something that you're considering. So that balance of use, but knowing that the UDO is going to be ultimately your strongest tool in defining what you want to see. This starts the conversation. That outlines it very clearly. So, all right, was there another, I don't know that we spoke to everybody.
I'm going to go, and then Satish, Councilmember Garamella, will go next. So Brad's comment a few moments ago teed up an intro for me in that you want to know where I would rather not see any dense residential mixed use. Well, mixed use is okay, but high density residential. Essentially, I don't want to see any land use plan update that essentially upzones areas other than the McCrimmon area, I would consider it, the TOD East and Town Center. Everywhere else, I think, is appropriately zoned, and I would not want to go already getting rid of very low density residential. If we have something that's low density residential, I think it should stay that way. If someone wants to bring us something that's a little denser than that, which would include townhomes, they can do that conditionally. I think that a few years ago was the time to really make sure that we had a good balance between single family detached and the apartments that are flooding our area. Some people have mentioned that maybe we're already doing our fair share for the region. At this point, I tend to agree that I know from a planning perspective, from development and economic development, it's important to do our share and make sure that we're providing the housing that everyone needs for the region. But our residents are clamoring for quality of life. And I think that every time that we make a whole area by right a denser use, we're getting more people and we're diluting our quality of life. So my goal right now is to promote development where we want it and keep everything else the way it is, and try to get more of a balance and get some more single-family detached.
So just to recap, you're okay with perhaps more density in key strategic areas like the sub areas, but outside of that, you'd rather just stick to lower. Okay.
I think it's pretty much a not broken, don't fix it, or becoming broken, let's not be part of breaking it more.
Does everyone else? Well, I guess I don't want to open up to everyone.
That's a blank statement. Hold on a second. So just so I understand that within the activity centers, because some of those live outside, many of those live outside of the sub areas. I guess, is that an area where you would see there would be flexibility in there being multifamily, like standalone multifamily, not mixed use, but standalone multifamily, or do you think that's not an appropriate area for multifamily?
If it's over near transit and over near the airport, perhaps. But essentially, what I'm saying is, where are the vacant parcels? Mm-hmm. Those should be looked at ad hoc, and if it's appropriate, there might be an opportunity to make that a little bit higher density, but I would lean against it, essentially, except for those three areas that we're really looking to make dense so that they can be successful, which is McCrimmon area, TOD East, and Town Center. I am not really that amenable to changing our present land use plan, which already has a lot of happening by right, which is making a lot of our residents displeased until we catch up with our infrastructure. And if the developers want to help us make sure that we have the road infrastructure, the parks infrastructure, and help us advocate for the schools that we need so that we can get in front of our town's needs, all the better. I want to collaborate with them and get us to the point where our residents don't feel like we're playing catch-up. So those are my general overall thoughts on this land use plan. Anything that allows an upzone by right, I'm going to have a problem with.
So the designations, even if, again, none of the zoning, but like if it shows higher than current zoning, is that what you're saying? If it shows something, so like the piece on the far left near Breckenridge, I think it's like low density residential now, and I think now it's showing it a medium density in the land use plan, which is like a 10 to 20 year vision. You don't want that. You wanted to keep it at whatever the equivalent current zoning is to match?
That is correct.
Okay.
I'd rather see single family detached in places like that. Holly Creek would be an example. We're going from very low density to something else. Low density would allow single family detached. I'm not looking for medium density that would allow townhomes. I'm definitely not looking at NAC.
Because I want to make sure that we're delivering the right land use plan here, or that we're all on the same page. So right now, something is currently very low density. We're showing on this land use plan that it is medium density. It could be single family attached or single family detached. You would approve this land use plan knowing that when you get to the UDO, part of what you're going to talk about is, by right, that can be single family detached. A conditional use would be single family attached, and that would be something that would have to come in front of you for discussion. So you would be okay with this land use plan still showing it as medium density residential, knowing that the amendment to the UDO would do what you're trying to accomplish. You're allowing the flexibility that it could be.
No, I'm not agreeing to that. It should be low density, in my opinion, especially with a 2-year lag between now and when we can actually make the UDO happen.
Okay. So what you're recommending would be a fundamental change to this land use plan. I just want to make sure, I mean, is that something we need to talk about with the rest of this group? Because that's a big departure from where we're at.
I agree. And I think that's probably going to be a discussion.
So just for further clarification on that, I'm wondering, Mayor, does your opinion stay the same if it's the higher density, medium density, but townhomes aren't an option, you still have a single family detached? Like if we add in a category that's just higher density single family detached without townhomes, I'm just looking for clarification.
So something, you're saying like something between low density residential and something and medium density residential that is a denser version of single family detached. Hypothetically. Okay.
My goal is to have our infrastructure meet the needs. Right now, it doesn't meet the needs of our current population. If we add 8,000 more people in the next 10 years, we're even farther behind. So we're behind the 8 ball already with things being built by right. If we allow anything more dense, we're falling farther behind. Unless we're willing to commit to make the investments necessary to catch up our infrastructure, I'm not comfortable with a land use plan that essentially allows more density. And I know that goes against planning principles and doing our share, but I think we're already doing our share. Our density is pretty appropriate for our size, and I don't want to necessarily cram more people into Morrisville. Okay. I believe Councilmember Daramella would like to add some thoughts.
Yeah, I think I've been hearing since the start of it. We need, Brad, if you can help to come up with a different, like a cheat sheet, giving us a preview of which all areas are medium density, high density, because Breckenridge is a mix of medium and high density. You know, as you rightly said, Kitts Creek is high density. And when I start looking at things around, the average townhome is almost touching $400,000. We went through a lot of discussions regarding the wood partners where the developers, you know, I remember Kevin O'Connor coming and saying their company came and saw it, but it was not feasible for them to make it. So I want to understand, like, you know, what is the need of the stock? You know, what kind of stock is Morrisville looking for? There is no room for having $1 million home in Morrisville. A lot of my friends are actually moving to FX for basement homes and carry. There are very few lots which are available there. So the reason I ask these questions are, it's not that what I want or I don't want. What can we accommodate with what we have is the question. And to say that is only based on, you know, the House of Living is doing an excellent job. So how would we know that? You know, what is the present market demand, and how do we go about it? Because that is a fundamental to understand. Yes, everyone knows there's a high demand for apartments. Why is there there's a need for single-family detached or non-detached? So I just need that kind of information that is always lacking, because till the zoning comes in and the guy says, we have got CBRE or someone, they did the market analysis and this is a good place to do it. Have we consulted any of those kind of forms for us to understand? Everyone says Morrisville is in the center of everything. They like to invest in Morrisville. But what is that? You know, independently, but as a town, did we even look into that area? Because every time I hear is only during a single rezoning, or, you know, saying that they have done the market study, including the 101 Holly Creek. They did their market study. They found that it was a viable option to have it. So that is very important, because I am having a hard time when I'm hearing people are saying we don't want medium density. Medium density is most of the subdivisions in Morrisville are medium density. And so we need to have that clear picture. Every place, you know, is right now, as is, single families. Breckenridge would be more liberal compared to what Kitts Creek and other neighborhoods are, which are into more in the high density and other areas. So that is, we are commingling very easily, telling them I don't want medium density versus I want high density. We all get it. we don't want a whole lot of apartments. If that's the end goal, so how will you backtrack and start working around it than saying we don't want medium density? Because that is, like, for any guy to do it, like, Morrisville, 1 acre is almost going like 400,000 or 500,000 an acre. So if you don't want to keep it, low density, or, it's like 1 acre, for every 10, I think 1 acre a lot, so we don't have those stock. So what's the next alternative? Is the medium density?
To answer your question, and again, I'll let Nick chime in after this. So we've been in contact with developers throughout this process. We had a developer council meeting, and we also did interviews and had some developers on our technical advisory committee. And we've also had just feedback provided in general from developers about our plan when we initially shared this. And if we, let's just say we didn't have a land use plan and we completely let the free market build housing, all they would literally build is townhomes and apartments. That is it. And that is what they're telling us market-wise. They're very eager to just build that anywhere. And they would literally build it anywhere. As long as we let them, they would build it. Realistically, though, we know we can't do that. We can't just have the entire town built over with townhomes and apartments. The citizens don't want that. And so we're trying to increase or maintain. We actually have a good diversity of housing units right now. I mean, I think we're one of the leaders in terms of housing diversity. And, to some of your points, or some of the members' points earlier, we do our share in terms of offering a nice diversity. So that's true. We do. I think the development community just wants us to keep in mind that there is this tremendous pent-up demand that just continues to just be there, and they just want to ensure that we provide multiple different opportunities for different housing types throughout Morrisville. I think what we are trying to do is focus those higher density housing choices in areas that are near transit and near infrastructure that's being built, like the Crimin Extension area, and then kind of steer it away from areas that are already kind of established single-family areas. But that being said, the medium density, Member Garamella made a good point. Most of Morrisville is at least medium density residential, if not high density residential, but a lot of it is narrow lot or smaller lot, single-family or townhome already. So that's why we're very apprehensive to take everything in our land use plan, our future land use map, and turn it into low density just so that we can say that we're not adding density. In the eyes of the development community, and I think Nick's eyes with housing, that's just not a realistic perspective. I mean, we know any kind of development that's going to happen. Developers aren't wanting to build 1 acre, single-family, multi-million-dollar homes. That's just not what they're proposing. And so we advise, I guess, pretty strongly not to do that. We say, could you, like for anything that's medium density, could you consider that one day as a medium density product, whether it is, don't worry about townhome or single family, but just medium density. And then through the zoning district, you can articulate, okay, only townhomes or only single family detached. I mean, you can get into that level of detail. Here, we're just saying, could you envision a medium density type product, whether it's single family detached or townhome, you don't have to pick one yet, in this particular area at some point in the next 10, 20 years. We haven't seen anyone since 2009 try to build a very low density subdivision. They just don't exist anymore in our area. Look at Cary for an example of what they're building and what the market's wanting. I mean, they want narrow lot single family or townhome if they're going to do single family. So I don't know if I answered your question.
No, like you did. That's exactly where I was trying to serve, because you said spot on. We got to also keep in mind is not what I want or you want. It's basically what people want. We don't have a stock of people who. There is one survey I saw, I think affordable housing. They came up with a plan. How much can Morrisville residents afford? And that, like having a 1 acre lot houses, there's very few, less than 5%. So we got to also look at the stock of what our per capita and also how it all plays into this role. And it's not that we have to discuss everything here, but the point I wanted to make is most of Morrisville is medium density, and that is what it is. It's done. It's been there for the last 15, 20 years. So that's what I wanted to leave it.
Yeah, and most of the western side of town, we've continued medium density. We haven't proposed any new high density apartments, or not even high density apartments, just high density in general. I mean, we're keeping it all along Church Street, all the vacant areas. One thing to Mayor Pro Tem, I think maybe it will help with her and that map. Right now on our interactive development map page on the planning website, we have a slider map that shows the draft future land use map and the current zoning map, and you can slide between the two over a June 2020 aerial. And that area will very quickly reveal which areas are vacant. You'll see the bunch of trees or no development there. And then you can see, okay, how does this play with zoning? Like, how does this, here's our current situation with our zoning. How does the future land use map interact with that? So that's something I'd encourage you all to check out. I just wanted to plug that map because I think it would be helpful.
Well, and Brad, I can send you the vacant parcel shapefile and you could probably extract from the existing conditions, but I can send that to you.
Yeah, I can make another map with that. Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Okay. So this has been good. We're looking to wrap. We're a little bit over time. Councilmember Fender has one more thing to say, very short, and then I'll pass back to Brad to let us know steps going forward. We obviously only got to the first of 5 things we were going to talk about tonight.
You touched on a lot of different topics that'll help the other topics, so that's the silver lining, so that's good.
Okay. Councilmember Fender.
Thank you. So now I have 2 things, but they're both really short. One, the medium density. Yeah, a lot of Morrisville is zone medium density residential, and that's why we have so many townhomes, and we want to move away from that. And nobody's asking for any of the zone or any of these areas to be 1-acre lots. We're simply just looking for a category that does not include townhomes. So just wanted to clarify that. And then, so this, my last comment is not in the weeds, it's policy. In the land use plan, in the narrative, we talk a lot about tree canopy and how residents feel that parks or in green space is very important, a high priority. Yet the land use plan map does not reflect that at all. So that our policy, we're advocating for our policy says we want more green space, but our land use map doesn't reflect that at all. We haven't added any new green space with this map.
So what this is specifically addressed in that future land use map highlights page. So unless we make a decision to designate an area as green space, as preserved open space or park space, we can't show that as open space because that's private property and that's someone has the right to develop that. And so unless you all make a commitment here tonight that we want this parcel as parks and we don't care, go ahead and make that green space, we'll happily do that, but we can't show that on a map unless you make that commitment. Now,
and I understand the logistics and the limitations of what. Of what the purpose of this is. It doesn't show our vision at all.
So hold on, I need to respond to this in a couple of different ways. One, to Brad's point, when he says you need to make a decision, it means the town would need to purchase land before you then dedicate it as a park. Otherwise, you're putting yourself into a position for a taking, which would be, I mean, if you made my house a park without telling me my house was going to be a park, I now can't sell it because you've indicated what it's going to be. That would be a problem. But the other aspect of that is it's not the job of a land use plan to identify where parks and open space are going to be. it is the responsibility of, again, the land use policy designations that we talk about a little bit later in here to say things like we want parks, open space, gathering spaces, all of that should be incorporated into any future development. And we do talk about later on, like on page 55, the perfect example. There's two different ways to develop a site. There's conservation design. There's being thoughtful about how you manage what's on site, how you protect what's on site. Or you can do a more traditional, typical cookie cutter subdivision. The policies that we lay out inside this plan, both in the land use designations, but also in the subsequent land use considerations chapters, really set the stage for both policy and then regulatory amendments that you'll make that would drive home that ability to protect tree canopies, to protect.
Right. Either our UDO has to change, or we do land acquisition.
Well, or you follow the land use considerations that are provided in this document, the recommendations that are here. So there's a couple of different things that are working together to protect tree canopies. The only other way, I guess the way that statement was phrased, the only other way you could protect tree canopies is that the town would have to get out a checkbook and buy the properties that have the tree canopies that you want to preserve.
Well, that's what I said. We either have to modify the UDO or buy land, buy the land. But
no, the third option was the land use consideration recommendations that are in this plan. So there are tools in here that are setting up what development should look like, what development could look like, and these are things that you'll point to when someone comes in to develop a site. Are you in adherence to our, I'll say 2020 land use plan? And if the answer is no, then
That's not great.
Get the local numbers. I think the call just dropped. Here, wait.
Yeah, that would probably be the problem.
I'm sorry. Gotcha. Stuff on here.
Wi-Fi's down.
Well, that's probably what we're seeing here.
That's not great.
Are you on the chat at all on your phone? Can you let them know that we just lost internet? Okay. Now I need that number that's behind you.
919.
Wait a minute. No, the phone's not. We lost our phones too. Okay.
919.
Hold on.
No.
It's still booting. They're still going. Okay. Yeah. We can't hear you. Speak up.
I took down the Facebook Live feed to the email this.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I see.
Yeah.
I still can't get the phone. registering.
So again, I just encourage you to please reach out to me. I'll say it again. I'll keep saying it. Email me, call me, do whatever you need to do.
Yeah, so is he.
I'm back in.
And that's back
Just can't
up.
get the phone to work.
Just so that we can speed up the work session. Okay? And also, please look at the frequently asked questions sheet. Please look at the future land use map highlight sheet.
919.
I think those are going to be helpful answering.
Oh, no number's gone.
Oh, wait a minute.
I'll end it at that. Bring it over back to Mary. I hear you trying to end it.
What's that number?
919. 296 4964.
Now I'm going to need the pen in just a second.
Welcome to the audio conferencing center. Please enter a conference ID followed by pound.
378 337 92 pound.
You are now joining the meeting.
Thank you. At this time, according to my computer clock, it is 8:26. We have someone waiting, but we will take a 10-minute break right now and come back at 8:37 so that we're fresh and ready to hear from Ellis Caton. So please come back on at 8:37. Remember that your mics are probably still live and that our meeting chat is public record. Thank you. We'll see you in 10 minutes. Okay. It is 8:37. We are going to come back into session at this time. I'd like to recognize Ellis Caton with RDU, who's going to do the third of our work session presentations this evening. Mr. Caton.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I about had a heart attack about a minute ago. Everything went deathly silent. And I looked at the chat and everybody had cut it on mute. It's like, I was like, I'm going to speak in 2 minutes. And it went, sound went out. So anyway, I'm glad that things are back. Tonight, I'm going to share the Airport Authority's perspectives about land use compatibility and noise. Do I have the control, or is that?
He can request control, or he can just tell me to advance the slide.
Yes, sir. We're happy to either advance those for you, or if you can see the request control button, you could take it over, but we're happy to do forwarding for you.
And where is that button at?
It should be on the taskbar that shows on your screen.
More actions. No. You can share tray, mute, raise your hand, hide. I do not see it.
We'll just tell him to advance.
We're happy to forward for you.
Okay, I'll just tell you when to forward it to keep things going. Okay, so tonight I'd like to share with you information on roles and responsibilities of the FAA, the authority, and the town. I'll talk a little bit about land use compatibility and FAA guidance. I'll share some information on noise contours, discuss World Health Organization recommendations, the FAA Airport Improvement Program funding reauthorization from a few years ago and the noise provisions in that. Some recent correspondence between the town of Morrisville and the FAA, and then I'll close with the authority's policy recommendation. You can advance. Advance, please. And advance again. So roles and responsibilities. The FAA, they have the overall responsibility for managing the safety and efficiency of the National Air Traffic Control System. They control all the airspace around RDU. They direct pilots in what directions to take off and land. They establish the arrival and departure procedures. And they regulate and certify pilots and aircraft. Next slide. The authority's roles and responsibility is to fulfill its legislative mandate. That's to operate, maintain, improve, and promote the airport. Except for height zoning, we don't have any local land use zoning authority. Our obligations from the FAA are that we must take action to ensure compatible land use regulations surrounding the airport are established and maintained. And then we have the role and responsibility of educating the public on aircraft noise impacts through things like our noise disclosure and the noise website. Next slide, please. And the town of Morrisville's role and responsibility, like any other town across the country, you've got the power to adopt and implement zoning and use and development restrictions, such as the airport noise overlay district that you have. Next slide, please. Now, land use compatibility, talk about that for a second. The FAA published this chart back in 1983, shows various noise contours and various land use categories down the y-axis. And it shows that, for instance, residential is acceptable, single family in particular, is acceptable in less than 65 DNL. But as you go into the 65 to 70 DNL, it's normally unacceptable. And when you look at the footnotes, it says it's dependent upon application of soundproofing material. I'm going to talk a little bit later about why that may not be such a good idea. Next slide, please. One more. Airport noise contours. This graphic shows some contour map that we put together about a decade ago. And it shows areas that at that time were within the airport overlay districts of not only Morrisville, but also Cary, City of Raleigh, and Durham County. And Morrisville is the purplish color in there. And the gold line is 65 noise contour. And you can see that it stretches out a little bit past North Carolina 54 or Chapel Hill Highway, whichever one you want to call it. Next slide, please. Okay, before I start talking about airport noise contour comparison, I want to talk about a few acronyms for a minute. You see on various slides that I have the word DNL, and that's an acronym for day-night average sound level, and it's the FAA's primary metric for aircraft noise analysis. It's really the total accumulation of all the sound energy during an average annual day, but spread out uniformly over a 24-hour period. But it basically is showing the average conditions over the course of the year. So whenever I use the term DNL, and I'll make a distinction on that in the next slide, I believe. You might notice that the contours on the left from 1992 and those on the right in 2014, well, they shrunk and they got smaller. And you might jump to some conclusions about that. I'm going to walk you through the airport's position and justification for utilizing the 1992 DNL contours for long-term planning purposes. But while we're here on this slide, why did the contours shrink from 1992 to 2014? And there's really two big reasons. One, around the year 2000, the FAA required all commercial aircraft to become stage 3 aircraft, that is quieter aircraft, and phased out all the noisy stage 2 aircraft that came before them. The other thing is that in 1992, American Airlines was operating a hub at Raleigh-Durham, and that's contemplated in the 1992 noise contours. 2014, we were still climbing out of the 2008-2009 recession, and so there were fewer flights, and that kind of affected the size of the contours. Now, you might say another conclusion. You might say, well, the contours have gotten smaller. Haven't your noise complaints gone down? And that would not be the case, as non-compatible land uses have been reduced within the 65 DNL, which are the orange areas on the slide. And as the FAA has introduced new flight procedures, many airports have experienced increasing community concern about noise exposure that's out beyond these contours. So these contours threaten the ability of airports. The newer contours threaten the ability of airports to meet the growing capacity demands for the region in a timely fashion. Next slide, please. in this slide, it says single event, but the graphic's really showing a term called sound exposure level. And this is a metric that represents all the acoustic energy of one individual noise event as if that event occurred all within a 1 second time period. This metric is different than the DNL I just described on the previous page, which was the average annual condition. This is the condition that occurs with a single flight. And in this graphic, it's illustrating the noise magnitude in decibels, which is not the DNL spread out over the ear. The decibel is the noise that goes with it in that 1 second time, everything compressed in it. Of the single 737-800 jet, Boeing 737-800, which is a very typical aircraft at RU. And in this graphic, it's showing landings coming in from the south, which come in over Morrisville and take off to the north over Raleigh. You'll notice that the purple contour, the 70 decibel level, starts way out over Jordan Lake and gets wider as you get into Morrisville. Next slide. All right, now wind conditions changed. I think I said a minute ago winds were coming in on the south. No, the winds were from the north when takeoffs are going towards North Raleigh. Here in this graphic, we're showing when the winds are coming out of the south and takeoffs are over Morrisville when landings are coming in over North Raleigh. And the fingers that you see on the takeoffs over Morrisville, they're kind of associated with the flight procedures. Flights that are heading back to the northeast, they're the ones that are kind of bending off to the side, and the ones going straight out are taking flights off towards Florida, and there's some going off west, heading out Dallas or heading out Nashville, that sort of thing. And while these flight procedures vary, you'll notice that some areas experience well, actually, a lot of Morrisville will experience the 70 decibel level on just about any pattern. And some areas are even in the 80 noise decibel level. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, the town of Morrisville land use plan. On the left is the town's current future land use designations. And on the right is the proposed future land use designations as they were back in December. And that they were last shared with us around the February timeframe. And in the one from on the right, there's transit-oriented development, which is that dark brown area on Highway 54 and McCrimmon Parkway. You know the area well because it's the proposed transit-oriented development area. And that's the area that we were opposed to back at that time because it was introducing residential development on the airport side of North Carolina 54. For years, the town has allowed residential development on the non-airport side of Highway 54 inside these gold areas that represent 65 noise contour. And we were, based on the map that we knew at the time, we were just opposing the change that was bringing residential closer to the airport. Next slide, please. So just about 2 weeks ago, August 14, we learned that the draft plan now greatly expands the areas in which the 65 DNL has residential development. Now it's that entire reddish area on the screen can have residential areas in it based on the text over to the left, as well as schools. And there's reasons not to have schools over there as well. Next slide, please. And one more. I'm going to talk about the World Health Organization. So I'm going to start talking about the reasons why. back in 2018, the World Health Organization's European Regional Office released their environmental noise guidelines. And in their study, they examined the human health effects of various sources of noise, including transportation sources like aircraft, roadway, rail, leisure wind turbines, which I can imagine would be an issue in some areas of the country. In their report, they had strong recommendations and they had conditional recommendations. And strong recommendations are those that can be adopted as policy in most situations. They feel like confidence that the desirable effects of adherence to the recommendation outweighs the undesirable consequences. The conditional recommendation requires a policy-making process. Next slide, please. And in their recommendations, they recommend that communities reduce noise level produced by aircraft below the 45 DNL level. It says LDN here. That's the same thing as DNL. And so the FAA would be changing the 65 DNL standard to 45 DNL. And that is quite a change. And for nighttime noise exposure, they strongly, I was talking about recommendations a minute ago, they strongly recommend reducing noise levels produced by aircraft to below 40 DNL. As nighttime aircraft noise above this level is associated with adverse effects on sleep. Now, these guidelines are produced by the WHO in Europe, but the data that they used for their study came from all over the world, and quite a bit of it came from America. Next slide, please. So the FAA, how do they play into this? A couple of years ago in the FAA reauthorization, Congress stepped in due to a lot of noise issues going on around the country, and they stepped in and they're requiring the FAA to conduct a review of the impact of noise exposure on communities around airports. The FAA must submit a report to Congress on their findings within 2 years. And so they're also required to recommend revised land use compatibility guidelines. They're required to also do a study on day-night average sound levels and to evaluate alternative metrics to the current average day-night level standard. They have not progressed very far on this. They are, I think you might say, behind schedule, but they have until the fall. I think it's October is their deadline, and I'm not sure if they're going to make it there. Next slide, please. Okay, so recent correspondence between the FAA and Morrisville. So Brad West there on your staff corresponded with the FAA, and they copied me on the correspondence. One reason was that Brad tried one group in the FAA, and after going through 4 different groups, one of the groups said, "Ellis, can you answer this question?" And I'm like, "Well, no, Brad's not asking me the question." I had to kick it back to the FAA, and the Airport District Office responded July 17th. And they provided the town with their land use compatibility and airports guidance document, which I'm sure your consultant probably already was aware of. And the FAA said the guidance document won't change in the near term. However, you are doing a long-term planning effort. And also, however, the definition of significant noise, based on the studies that I was just mentioning, may change. And the present threshold is 65 DNL, but they're studying whether to lower that threshold. And the lower threshold, of course, may impact land uses within even the current airport overlay district, much less residential areas that might be closer to the airport now. Next slide, please. Actually, 2 slides. So we're down to the last slide, and it's the airport's policy recommendation. The authority's policy recommendations for of the town to maintain the integrity of the current airport overlay district, which is based on 1994 composite noise contours, and to follow the existing FAA guidance for incompatible land uses, but recognize that residential land uses may be permitted. What you can't do is you can't sound attenuate outdoor spaces. So you might have a brick wall and sound insulated windows, but when you go outside, it's going to be noisy. And also keep in mind that there's the possibility of these lower national noise standards. Another thing we'd like for you to bear in mind is that the authority has a history of legal settlements for alleged noise impacts, and that points towards potential future litigation if you have more residents nearby. So, in closing, we heard the other night, we heard it said that first do no harm. And we feel that the 1994 noise contours have been a good tool for long-term land use planning to assure that we have non-noise compatible development in areas surrounding RDU. And we recommend keeping the integrity of the current overlay district as a means of doing no harm. So our recommendation is that you maintain the existing airport overlay district without modification. So that's everything I have to say. I'll be glad to answer any questions you have.
Mr. Caton, thank you so much for that presentation. I will now recognize council members in order with their questions and comments. Councilmember Rao, please.
I guess, Mike Ellis, thank you so much for that presentation, and thank you to the airport for everything you do. We know you're going through it. The team is going through a tough time right now. My question is really to staff. If we could pull the maps back up, to what extent would this affect some of the McCrimmon area we've talked about when we had the two proposals for Plan A and Plan B, and one was council decided to have more of a mixed-use residential component? Would this affect that plan, or would we be out of that? And I'm sorry for having to ask you to pull the maps back up. I just want to hear from staff and what their opinion is in terms of how this affects our future planning for some of these areas we talked about.
Sure. I can chime in, and I'm sure the planning director would also like to chime in. And I know that it's on a slide here somewhere, have the revised noise contours and also the current FAA land use guidelines. Those might be helpful in my comment here. But so when we were notified of the revised airport noise overlay contours, we checked, or consultants really first checked, but we verified, that what the FAA noise land use guidelines were. We found with the new 2014 guideline or noise contours, which we base our entire overlay on, those have been virtually completely shifted out of Morrisville towards I-40. And so now you're looking at more kind of the 55, 60 area, where before it was 65. And so as a result, there's this whole discussion about how should we look at, we're also bidding this expensive road through this area. Is this an opportunity to kind of reconfigure what we imagine for this last large stretch of land in Morrisville? I mean, do we want to continue to see only industrial development, maybe some office flex in this area, or do we want to see something with more diversity in terms of uses? And so Hal Levine pitched to you all, and Nick's gone now, but I can speak for Nick, two different scenarios where we very clearly showed you one that's sort of a status quo, where it's just mostly continued with restricted uses and mostly industrial, and then the other, or flex, and then the other is a diversity of uses. It would include the multifamily, when we say multifamily, it could be senior living, it could be congregate living, it could be workforce housing, could be apartments, could be condos. So all those things are on the table. And so you all very clearly, unanimously went with the let's diversify the uses in this corridor. And so Nick took that to heart as feedback and said, okay, that's the feedback we need. And then he fleshed out in this plan your more specific recommendations. He also provided a visualization of how the uses could be spread around. Again, that's just a visualization to guide in the scale and the mix of uses. It's not literally what's going to be built, just there for your reference. And so with what's being proposed now, and Ellis did a good job acknowledging this, and by the way, I appreciate Ellis and all the communications he's offered. He's been a member of our technical advisory committee, so I just wanted to quickly shout out to Ellis that we appreciate that. But we are within current FAA land use guidelines as the plan is proposed. We went and wanted to verify with FAA, and Ellis brought up some quotes from the email that I exchanged that I had with the FAA, and he was right. I had to go in circles trying to find someone to give me some information that was directly related to this. Luckily, the folks at the FAA were very helpful, and they finally, I think, shoved me over to some department that handled this general area. And so they very clearly, directly said, here's our guidelines. Look at the table, and Ellis showed the table. And I asked them as a follow-up, do you foresee these changing anytime soon? And the answer is no, they don't. And I can pull up the exact email and the wording, but it was sort of in the distant future, we plan on revising these potentially, or not even revisiting them. But that as far as they're concerned, there is no immediate plans to change it. And I think Ellis touched on that. They don't have any immediate plans to revise that. So from House of Levine's perspective, we're well within noise airport overlay or FAA guidelines. We're going a step above and requiring noise attenuation for uses below 65 decibel. So we're asking that a multifamily and maybe schools, that's the last area that schools could potentially go in probably, but there's some other sites, but this is one of the few large chunks of land that any use like that, any sensitive uses of assembly have noise attenuation built in to them. Ellis is absolutely right. There is the risk of having noise when you're outside. That's a fact. I won't dispute that. But we are limiting to sort of meet the airport, and we heard them in our TAC meetings, and we heard Ellis throughout this process, to meet them more halfway. What we've done is we've removed single family attached and detached from the equation in the entirety of that whole extended orange area that you're looking at now. So that will not be allowed still. One of the reasons is because noise attenuation for individual single family homes is very difficult to do, and it's expensive, and we're not even sure we have the legal authority, according to our town attorney, to even consider that because it's single family. So we're limiting it to only multifamily. That's why you probably notice a massing of multifamily in that one area. That's one of the factors. Second, we understand, we've heard loud and clear from RDU and Ellis that they have plans for a third runway. And so in the past, they've mentioned the Vision 2040 plan. We did look at that. There's, I think, a preliminary concept of how that runway would orient, but I know it still hasn't been finalized exactly where it is. Right now, I think it's on the bank of the Briar Creek Reservoir, sort of north of the top runway at RDU. So we took a chunk out. Instead of revising the entirety of this airport overlay, we just took a chunk and left that as is. Because if noise contours, even though the 2014 does show it out of there, if the third runway is added, noise contours could potentially change in that area. So we wanted to be better safe than sorry and leave that area in place. That was a long-winded answer. Apologies for that, but I just wanted to be very clear.
As a quick follow-up, my last question, if they did lower the standard in the distant future, would we open any potential litigation against the airport or the town? I mean, the last thing I would want to do is in the future, a future council, the resident would complain and say, has that happened in other areas of the country, Ellis?
I am not sure about whether that has happened, but the authority, I think we would have to consider whether or not to bring the town in if we got sued over residential getting closer to the airport. But also, if I could think, if you allow me 1 second, I'd like to clarify something Brad was talking about, the 2014 contours. I had said the 2014 contours were just a few years after the 2008-2009 recession, and that air traffic was still down and building. Of course, we're in the pandemic right now, and air travel is very far down, but there's no reason to believe it won't regain in the future. And before the pandemic, it was regaining quite a bit. But our master plan that we just approved, it used the 2014 contours, but it projects growth beyond that. And to use contours based on a low point of the airport's growth might not be the best strategy. Another thing I'd like to mention is the guidelines. You're correct. The guidelines won't change, but what would change is the definition of significant noise. And if the FAA changes the noise standard from 65 down to even 55, the contours are going to stretch way beyond where they do today, the areas that are affected. So it's not the guidance document per se, it's what does the FAA say is noise that affects people. And so I'd like to make that point clear. But I can do some research on whether or not other communities have been enjoined in a lawsuit because the airport got sued. And I can get back with Brad with that information.
Yeah, it might be helpful to have the FAA guidelines up there on the slide, whoever's controlling the slide, just as a refresher, because there was a lot of information on that, and I don't know if everyone saw it. But a lot of our land use plan recommendations are based on that. To Ellis's point, we do think with the third runway that patterns could change, growth could happen, except we're seeing in north, we're envisioning that north on that third runway. We understand that the noise contours could change more around that area. I know there's potential for them to change anywhere in the country, but being that that's where the planes are incoming or taking off, we decided to, instead of propose the entire area be amended, we carved out that chunk after hearing some input from Ellis at our TAC meeting. But yeah, I mean, we obviously, Ellis, I understand his point of view. We totally appreciate that stance. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And Mr. Caton, thank you so much for being on our TAC committee. We really appreciate that. If we could bring up slide 11, please, whoever's moving the slides. I just have a couple of questions to dig in a little bit. I think it was the one with the contours. Yeah. Yep, that's it. Mr. Caton, I was hoping you could expand on the statement you made that using the new contours would hinder the airport's ability to meet the area's need for air service. Could you explain to me what exactly that means? Because one of the things I'm interested in is how us changing any land use will affect your operations negatively because we value the airport. It's helped make our region what it is. We don't want to damage things, so that sort of set off a couple of red flags to me. So if you could give me a little bit more detail about that statement.
Well, okay, so on the right, just using the 2014 noise contours, which are not what we projected out in the master plan. And it's our position to use the contours closer to the ones over on the left, the 1992 contours. Because, but let me talk on the 1992 noise contours rather than the right. The areas in orange are the 65 noise contours, and they currently reach out just a little bit beyond Highway 54 there in Morrisville. Residential, there's some on that side of the road in Morrisville, but you don't have residential closer to the airport as a rule. Our complaints come from way further out. And because we don't have a large number of complainers that are inside the current 65. If we allow residential, change your overlay district, and you choose to allow residential in tune with maybe the contours in the 2014 figure, the orange there pulls back close to I-40, and you allow more residential, you do allow residential between Highway 54 and close to I-40. That's a lot more people to complain, and you can give us a navigation easement and you can give notice to buyers, but that doesn't stop people from complaining. And so, and it doesn't stop them from just trying to limit airport development, and that's what I meant.
Okay. Thank you for that answer. I appreciate that. So you talked about the FAA. So it doesn't sound like the FAA is thinking about adopting 55 or 45 anytime soon. So I appreciate that. You mentioned the FAA study ordered by Congress is due in the fall. Is that October of 2021?
Actually, it's 2020. I think my slide has the wrong date on it.
Okay.
It was enacted in 2018.
Okay. Later in the presentation, at slide 24, you said litigation might open up to litigation. But if ever all the parties are adhering to FAA regulations and guidance, the litigation, I'd imagine, would probably be not successful, and that would be generally against RDU, not us, correct?
I don't know what the nature of the lawsuit would be. I can tell you about the lawsuits we did have 25 years ago or 30 years ago when American opened up the hub. A number of people sued the airport, and they didn't sue the airline, they sued the airport. And the people that, the point to make there is, actually, if you could go back to that contour map, right. So the people that, well, let me do a point of reference here. So the 55 DNL is the dark green.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone who, when we were sued years ago, anyone who did sue, because it wasn't a class action, had the major lawsuit be in on it. Anyone who was inside the dark green won their settlement. So it goes out quite a way. And that's why we don't advocate someone allowing residential closer into the airport. Because even if and a minute ago, I think you said the FAA wasn't about to change the standard to 55. we don't know what will happen until, one, the study comes out, and then two, then there's a lot of process involved in making it. I just said, what if they did change it to 55? It just so happened that the master plan we just completed, noise contours for the 55 are kind of similar to the 65 that's on the 1992 map there. And if by holding the line on the 65, then you would kind of be protecting in the future if the contours change to 55. Okay. There are a lot of airports around the country that have serious noise problems, and they have caught the attention of Congress. And that's the reason for the study. We don't know what the outcome is going to be.
Yeah, when I fly into LaGuardia in New York, you're passing over houses just before you touch down. So there's different areas with different challenges. So I appreciate you bringing this forth. I understand that you guys are in a tough position, that you want it to stay the same. And we'll have to see how we come down and decide. I see that Mayor Pro Tem Johnson would like to add a comment, so I'll recognize her at this time.
Actually, thank you. I actually have a question more than a comment, but Ellis, thank you for being here with us. I think it's slide 10 has the contours with the airport overlay district on it. Can we just bring that up real quick? I want to make sure I'm kind of reading this right.
Talking about that one with...
I think that's it. Yep, that's it.
Yep.
So for us in the town of Morrisville, the area that we're talking about is in that purple area.
Yeah, everything in the purple area that's not on the airport side of Highway 54.
Okay. Okay.
You currently allow, and Brad, help me out here, but I think you currently allow residential on the other side of 54.
Yeah, we do. It's I think we call Airport Overlay B. It's AOB. And we, on our plan, recommends extending B.
Right. So we're talking about partially in that purple area, not all the purple, but if you look on the other side, on the Raleigh side, within that same 65 decibel line all the way to the right, there looks like there is residential development there. And so I'm not 100% sure what residential areas those are, and I don't know how long those homes have been there, but I'm curious to know what you hear from those folks, and they may be the ones that won the lawsuit in the green you just talked about. But I'm just curious if there's concerns up on that end of the contour.
Well, we do have concerns, but and I was just starting at the airport when these contours were being finished up with the 1994 long-range master plan. And these contours that you're seeing here are some contours we call the composite noise contours. They're a combination of the 1992 contours, a third runway that was contemplated different than our current master plan, which is relocating one of our two parallel runways. In the long term, we've left room for a third runway. But anyway, it's a composite noise contour. We sent out letters, as I read, to all the local governments and showed them the noise contours and asked them to update their zoning plans to prohibit residential inside the 65 noise contour. And I'm suspecting that Morrisville did the same as Raleigh, but and it doesn't account for all of Raleigh's subdivisions that are inside the goal, but Leesville Road, old Leesville Road, the city uses kind of a hard boundary, kind of like Highway 54 in Morrisville. I want to say Chapel Hill Road and Chapel Hill at the same time. And they use the old Leesville Road as their kind of marker. like watershed planning where you don't necessarily draw your watershed line on the actual high point. You kind of go to a road and say no gas stations on this side of the road.
Okay, but I guess, so have there been complaints out of that residential area?
Oh, yes, we do. We get complaints out of that area. The area that is inside the gold and not in the maroon overlay area, we get complaints from there. Yes, we do.
Okay, well, you also said you get complaints further out, so.
We do. We do.
Yeah. And the letters that go out, because there's a letter now that needs to go when you sell your house, when you're inside something. Is it the 60? Well, no, it's got to be inside 70. Isn't there a letter that is, I'm sorry, say again?
55 contour, the green line.
Got it. So all of us that live within the 55 contour get a letter explaining where we are in relationship to the airport now.
Yes, in the late 90s, I believe, we started requiring noise disclosure for second-time home sales. New developments do not have to disclose to home buyers that it's in a noise-impacted area. Many developers are happy to put it in there, but on the second sale of the home, it is required. It's usually part of all those disclosures you sign. You acknowledge this, acknowledge that.
Huh, but not the first time. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. And thank you for being with us tonight so late. We appreciate that.
Exactly. I'd like to echo the thanks. Looking to see if any other council members would like to ask a question or make a comment at this time. I'm looking in the chat. Okay, not seeing any. So, Ms. Caton, once again, thank you very much for all your efforts being part of our land use draft plan update. We really appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time to come present to us today. Some good information. If we have further questions, we'll funnel them through Brad to you. And like was mentioned earlier, we understand that your business model right now is undergoing a real challenge, and we recognize that RDU is so important to our region. So anything we can do to help support your operations, please do let us know. Okay. With that, does staff have anything for the good of the order that they'd like to share with council and the residents?
No, sir. Thank you.
Okay. At this time, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Recognize Councilmember Rabati.
At this time, I make a motion that we adjourn.
I'd like to recognize Councilmember Steve Rao.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. If Town Clerk Smith can please do a roll call vote to adjourn.
Councilmember Fender.
Aye.
Councilmember Garamella.
Aye.
Councilmember Rao.
Aye.
Councilmember Robati.
Aye.
Councilmember Scroggins Johnson.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson.
Aye.
Mayor Cawley.
Aye.
The motion to adjourn passes unanimously.
Okay. Thank you all very much. It is 9:25. We are adjourned.